Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Tuesday, November 26, 2019 Board of Selectmen's meeting. I'll read the agenda. 7 o'clock, we have citizens input. 7:05, we have a public hearing, the classification hearing on residential factor for our fiscal year 2020. 7:45, we have the Rotary Traffic Control Plan. We're also going to talk about some 15-minute parking signs to go back out on South Street. 8:05, public hearing, the 99 Restaurant of Boston LLC, doing business as the 99 Restaurant and Pub. 8:15, we have a public hearing, the MIAA High School Super Bowls. 8:30, we're going to follow up with a 2021 budget and goals for the year. Selectmen's update, town manager's update, assistant town manager's update, and then a few action items. Deputy Chief Buckley, would you lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Before we get to the big panel up front here, anybody here for citizens input? Yes, sir. Come on up.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Dick Heidecker, if you don't know me, Grove Street. I have a question that I've raised with the building committee on the Borough School, with Bill Keegan, all of whom have been cordial, mostly. We know what can happen on some of these meetings. But I'm finally bringing this before you rather than just continuing emails that you have gotten for the last 3-odd years. It isn't something that has just come up. It's been in the works. I have brought it to your attention, Bill's attention, the building committee, even the school committee, and have received no comments in any manner whatsoever over this period, except from the two bills. I have attended nearly all of the committee meetings since 2016. My other end of the character or the being is I've been involved with school construction work since 1961 with the School Building Assistance Commission, the Bureau, the Department of Board of Ed, and so on. So it isn't something that someone can say, I haven't the vaguest idea what's going on. But the problem began 3 years ago when the committee was so-called appointed. I've asked for the details on the vote appointing this committee. There is none. I requested through the statute on the requests for documents with the clerk's office. There is no document indicating the appointment of the committee as it is. Moreover, there's a second stage in the process which has not been followed through, which is as part of the statute or the regulations by the state. It indicates this committee shall be appointed per the local bylaw, charter, and whatever. I know the library is a strange animal. The Lovelies and I have discussed that issue of how that committee was appointed many times. But the point is, as you go through the process, there's a memo from the superintendent of schools in '97, which indicates that the original vote in '67, which established the building committee, is what should be followed by all departments, including the school department. Obviously, that is not being followed, and in fact, apparently your attorney has found the loophole in the process 6 months after the appointment and the questions that have been raised, and said, well, you have to realize that since they occupy the building and are responsible for maintaining and cleaning and what have you, it should be their project. But this is not what the 67 setup of the Permanent Building Committee called for. It was very clear that the building committee would do the presentation to town meeting of the plans, the process, the estimates, the construction, and would be assisting the other body in town to approach what needs they feel is most important to their project. This has not been followed for the last 2 decades, as far as I can recall, but it was out there. The process, however, fell down in certain areas where I have questioned certain activities that have taken place, minutes, the protocols, and whatever in the process, and I can't get answers other than, we've given you all of this material. Bill and I have discussed this many, many times, as well as the other bill. If I had all this paperwork, I'd have a file that's probably 2.5 inches thick. My file is about 10 pages plus 2 sets of estimates. That's it. The appointments, many of the minutes, I've asked for the appointments and the vote on the appointing authority, which is part of 35-4, I forget which document that is, 360, which states very clearly that the Board of Selectmen is the sole appointing authority for the town of Foxborough. How you define this or put it in the process, I don't know. I'm not an attorney. I never have been. So the point that I'm trying to get at, starting just with this one item, we have a $33 million project. We have estimates that were screwed up and had to be redone. We've asked for estimates on the heating system and the air conditioning. We did get 3 estimates on the heating system, and it should be something of interest to all of you. The heating system alone for the Borough School is $1.6 million. We start adding in air conditioning, and there are 2 numbers, $2.4 million and $3.4 million. When this question was raised, how do we have 3 numbers for this one item? The word came back through the architect, well, we'll average the 2 that we have rather than try and figure out which one it is. So the number isn't an accurate number. We can get into this later in terms of the bidding, but that's not something to cover this evening. It would take too long. But the issue is, as we look at the whole process, the comments that we have been given, everything, if it is there, should be available to everyone in town. Excuse me. If this were the case, the question would be raised in terms of what should be published and how much should be published. But there are minutes that are noted. Example is the response we did get from the request for documents on the appointment of the committee. Yes, we voted on the building committee. What was voted on and the minutes that were submitted were the 3 replacement members. 2, I believe, from the school department and 1 from this board, or 2 from this board and 1 from them. That vote is documented. We replaced 3 members with 3 new members to a committee that was never appointed. You know, this sounds very, very good and clean. But the big issue that we have to keep in mind is really very, very simple. It comes with the regulation from the state. It's a very simple clause. I just want to read part of it, not the whole thing. Yeah, it's Article 219, Program Integrity, where the authority determines that false or intentionally misleading information or documentation was submitted by an eligible applicant, its agents, a town, a city, regional, et cetera, the action by the authority may permanently revoke any and all payments due to a city, town, regional school district, et cetera, you all know the wording that normally follows in this kind of thing. But Article 220, right underneath it, is something that someone should have looked at a long time ago, waivers. The authority may, upon a written application in a format prescribed, written recommendation of the executive director, grant a waiver of any of these requirements, blah, blah, blah. They were concerned with the program integrity. That's what Article 19 is about. 20 is waivers, that they could waive things to move the project and not get hung up with a lot of garbage accordingly. None of that has been taken care of. In fact, the chairman has indicated there's been no application or granting of any waivers on this project.
Mr. Chairman,
The issue,
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Heidecker?
I think it's probably appropriate for Mr. Buchner to address this
two
information.
or three more minutes, if you don't mind.
A lot of stuff is stuff that can be refuted by him on many different levels. So I think there's a clear difference of opinion that Mr. Heidecker has versus that which has been discussed on many occasions. So I understand Mr. Heidecker's position on this. We've discussed it on numerous occasions, but there's clear disagreement about his position versus ours, as well as our legal attorneys, our committee chairman, the whole bit. So I just want to state that for the record, there's clear disagreement over that. So, it's just unfortunate, but I think there's nothing really the board can do about this tonight. So I just wanted you to be aware that it's probably best to hear the other side of that story from Mr. Euchre.
I think there is a lot that the board could do, and I'll be very brief now from this point on. I had a bunch of material, I'll skip it. I'll just go to what I'm thinking should follow at this juncture. What should follow is a meeting to see what is missing, how we can get around it, because that paperwork should be there. It isn't. Are we going to do it on this project and follow the same project in the Taylor School and the IGO School, which are going to follow this fairly rapidly? If it's this way, hey, we got problems. But the point I'd like to recommend is, basically, we need to sit down, discuss what's missing, see what we can do to resolve the problem. As I've mentioned to Bill and to you in the November 6th letter, we need to sit down and see if we can communicate with MSBA on how to resolve the problem. I don't like the legislature getting involved because they could trip on all kinds of things and all hell would break loose. We don't want to lose the grants that are allegedly there. Let's keep them, let's work with them, but can we somehow sit down with MSBA? I've talked to the attorney in there many times. She's a great gal, and we should get to it. The point is, can we get together, sit down, admit that these items are not in the document drawer anywhere, mine or yours or Bill's or Bill Euchner's. When he tells me that he's giving me a memo on the appointment of the committee, and I get 3 names.
Okay, well, what I'll do is I will talk to Bill Euchner and Bill Keegan, and we'll get together with you.
Yeah, the point is, I brought this up previously.
But I understand. But there's nothing with Bill not being here that we can do right now.
Well, he knows what I'm talking about, but anyway.
All right, thank
I
you.
appreciate it, and I thank you.
Thanks.
And I'll communicate through Bill then.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, classification hearing. All right, public meeting, so give a public notice.
It didn't come attached with the,
It's
Ed?
it's in there.
okay. In accordance with the requirements of the Mass General Law, Chapter 40, Section 56, and the Town of Foxborough Board of Selectmen will hold a fiscal year 2020 property tax classification hearing. Said hearing will be conducted on Tuesday, November 26, 2019, 7:05 p.m. at Town Hall, Andrew Gala Junior Meeting Room, and 40 South Street, Foxborough, Mass. 02035. The purpose of the public hearing is to consider the percentages of all fiscal year 2020 tax levy to be borne by each class of taxable real and personal property. All persons interested in the determination may appear and be heard at the time and place stated above.
Thank you. Okay?
All right, so just want to start off that we're going to make a motion to reconvene from our meeting that we started at 6 PM. So anybody make a motion on that?
Make a motion to
All
reconvene.
those in favor? All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So good evening. My name is Thomas Buckley. I'm the chairman of the Board of Assessors. With me tonight from the Board of Assessors is Lori Rudd and Robert O'Donnell. George Samir is the Chief Financial Officer. He will speak on the recap sheet, and also present is the Chief Assessor, Hannah Simons, and the Assistant Assessor, Kelly Richard. The purpose of this hearing is the Board of Select will make a decision as to whether or not they will shift the tax burden from residential class to the commercial, industrial, and personal property classes, which will, at this point forward, call the CIP. So I just want to, because we have a new finance director, and we're going to consolidate a lot of what you've heard in the past, so I'll just go over a little bit of why we're here and what we're asking for, and mostly for the people at home, because I think this board has been educated on this, and Chief O'Leary's been in government for a very long time. But I'm just going to read through these really quickly. So the tax classification hearing. So some of the commonly used terms that you're going to hear tonight. So new growth. So that's the additions to the tax base from the new construction and property improvements. The levy is the revenue raised through property taxes. The levy limit is the maximum dollar amount a town can raise in a fiscal year. Prior year's levy plus 2.5% plus the new growth and debt exclusion. We'll talk a little bit about that again. The excess levy capacity is the difference between the levy and the levy limit. Debt exclusion, which is a temporary increase to the levy to pay for capital projects as voted. CIP, again, that's your commercial, industrial, and personal property. And the MFR, which is your minimum residential factor. This factor represents the minimum percentage of the levy the residential class must pay. So the classification hearing. So in accordance with Mass General Law, the classification amendment, the Selectmen will hold a public hearing to receive public input relative to the decision regarding the determination of the residential factor for fiscal year 2020. Under Mass General Law, cities and towns are allowed to reallocate or shift the tax burden between the different classes of properties. As you know, in the 2011, we did go to a split rate for the 2012 tax year. Before that, this whole process was a lot easier. The residential factor determines the allocation of the real and personal property tax burden between the classes by deciding a residential factor. So that's what you'll be deciding tonight, is the actual residential factor, how much you decide to shift it towards the CIP aspect. So the current law allows increase in the CIP burden by 50% as long as the residential and open space classes contribute at least 65%. Over time, the residential property values have risen more than the CIP values. Without these shifts, residential property owners today would be paying more on real estate taxes. And we'll talk about a little bit about that when we go over really quickly the single tax rate and what the burdens would have been if you decide to go back to that single rate. So currently, the town of Foxborough has a shift of 1.199. So in the next chart, pie chart that you see, there's four classes that we tax to. You have the residential, commercial, industrial, and personal property. The residential properties make up the majority, about 77.865% of the total assessed valuation. Residential taxpayers will pay about 77.85% of the tax levy. We do not have open space in Foxborough. As you can see on there, you'll see open space. We actually classify that under chapter land through any of the open space that we have in the community. We don't have a separate class for that open space. So as you can see there, the residential full and fair valuations $2,623,000, $623,955,354. Again, and you go down there and it totals up to the bottom number there, $3,370,656,960, which is 100% of those percentage shares. So when you have that, so again, up until before 2011, you just took that number divided by the parcels, and that was your rate. Up since that time now, we do an analysis factor to figure out how much every class is going to pay as we move forward. So what we do is we calculate the minimum residential factor. This is the math where he establishes the MRF. At this time last year, our residential class percent was 78.095%, which was a decrease of 1.56%. The CIP class was 21.9505. That is an increase of 1.8. And again, those numbers down there just showing you what the full and fair valuations kind of the same one before. The next one page you see there, page 4B, that just shows the maximum residential factor. And again, on the bottom there, you'll see the minimum residential factor is just the math aspect of this. So it shows that 85% is the minimum residential factor that we can have. And again, we can't go below 65. I don't see Foxborough ever going to that rate. So if we adopt in a residential factor of 1, which is no shift, that's the same rate for all the same classes, it would result in a taxation of all property classes at the same rate, a single tax rate. In fiscal year 2020, the single tax rate would be 15.44 per thousand of assessment, using a residential factor of 0.9432. So using a residential factor of less than 1 results in an increase in the share of the levy taxes paid by the CIP. So again, you have that number. I always say we don't make up that number. It's every time we raise our hands at town meeting. There's a number to be raised. That final number comes to us. We actually have to raise that amount of money, and then we use that. Again, we split that across the classes and figure out how we're going to collect that money with all the taxpayers in the community. So if you look on page 5, and it has the tax levy comparison, current split, you'll see if we maintained the rate that we had, or the residential factor that we had last year, if we just decided we were going to carry that from last year to this year, this is where the comparison would be. So what you'll see, if you look on the left-hand side, you see residential and condominium. If you look down at the average tax and you slide over to the far right, you'll see an increase of 3.96%. So if we went with what we had last year, the residential taxes would go up about 3.96%. If you look again in the middle, you'll see total commercial, industrial, and personal property. And again, you look at the average CIP tax and look on the far right, again, you'll see that their tax would go up 2.9%. So that is if you carried last year's forward. So again, the burden on that one would be more on the residential. One of the things that Mike Capron, back in the day when I first got on the board many, many moons ago, was it's our job just to be fair and equitable. That is what the Board of Assessors is here for, and that's just something that we've really held on to and lived that mantra over these many years. The next page, you'll see page 6. That is if you wanted to go back to a single rate. So if the board decided to go back to that single rate, again, you'll look at the residential and condominium, you'll see the average tax. If you go all the way over to the right again, you'll see the residential tax bill will go up 9.13%. If you go down to the totals, commercial, industrial, personal property, look at their average tax, their tax would decrease 15.47%. That's if we decided, the board decided, nope, we're going back to a single rate, that's what you would be looking at. It has the average tax bill in there. Again, if you looked at that, the residential, again, average would be about $7,057, and the CIP would be $11,776. The next page, page 7, that'd be the rate if we decided to go with the split we had in 2011, 2012, for fiscal year 2012. If we went to that rate, this just gives you a general idea of where we would be. So again, under the residential, you see the average tax bill for the residential would go up 2.83%. And the total CIP tax would go up 5.97%. So that, again, is if you went back to the original split that we did back in 2012, fiscal year 2012. What I can tell you is historically what we've done over the years, for those of you who have been on the board, or if you like to sit home and watch this on television, God bless you, is that we always look to have the increase equitable across the classes. It's what we've done traditionally since we've done the split. There's only been 1 year that the board decided to not go with the recommendation of the Board of Assessors. I can't remember what that was. It was just a little shift on the part of the rate, but that's basically historically what this board has voted for in the past. If you look at the next page, so using that and sharing the increase across all the classes, you'll see this comparison here, so on page 8. So if you look again under the residential and you look at the average tax and look all the way over to the right, you'll see an increase of the residential at 3.7%. If you look down at the CIP, their average tax, you look over to the far right, you'll see an increase of 3.74%. That's the closest we can get to raise everybody's taxes the same percentage. Again, we're looking at equitability. Just raising everybody's taxes the same. We're not pushing it more on one burden on one class to another class on that aspect. Look at page 9. That just kind of gives you history of where we've been and fiscal year 2020. It'll just show you, the different the classifications that we've had, the values, how they've traditionally gone up, they've gone down. Commercial CIP fluctuates due to market demand. So the commercial properties are valued with their income and expense reports. So they're required to give the board their paperwork. They use that paperwork to find a value for that property. And you can see over the years, it's fluctuated. That's why we come in every year with different recommendations, because sometimes it's really good, sometimes it's really bad. But you can see there historically where the values have gone and what the rates have been as over the years going on. On page 10, you'll see the tax impact on property valuation shifts. So again, that is just giving you a general idea. You can look and go back to 2010 and see where the values, the assessed values were, where they've gone up. I mean, you can go from 2010 to 2011 and see that there's a drop in the residential, and then, it went down again, and then then it started to climb. We all live that in that world, and you can see where the values are shifting, and that's where we've come up with the rates that we have recommended over the past years. So the next set of pages will be the tax rate recapitulation, and I'll have George talk a little about those.
This piece right here is somewhat limited in the fact that I think Tom mentioned it a little bit earlier. The tax recapitulation sheet does just what it says. It reiterates everything that the town did during the course of the fiscal year. And it's a very important point to come up with that. Like you mentioned, that we don't come up with this out of nowhere. Like if you take the back page here, this final page, this is certified by the town clerk. These are all the moves that you made at the various town meetings, and they were voted on via town meeting. The next page in front of it is showing you the local receipts that we took in during the year and an estimation of what we think we could get next year. The second page from the front is actually showing you things like state aid that came in, local receipts, things that came in that we've spent. And then finally, it all goes into this, the front page where they're calculating, which is all the stuff that they just did, calculating up the actual tax rate. But I think there's two things that you want to keep in mind with this. This is, in fact, the engine that runs the entire town. This is your budget in a very unfriendly way. When I say unfriendly, the things that go to this tax recap sheet, there are a lot of pages, and they're all interconnected, and they're not all here, okay? They're all hooked up to where you're getting each one of these pieces from. But I think there's two things that I wanted to put out. This is going to be integral to something that we're going to do in about a half hour to an hour or whatever when we get to the estimation of the, of next year's budget. Because, at least from my standpoint, I try to base it on the recap sheet, so I build a mock-up of the recap sheet to move forward. And then number two, I think that when we were talking the other night at the tax classification hearing with the assessors, one thing that happened to come up with some local things is that I think that something everybody needs to know is all the calculations that are coming into this final sheet isn't something that's just inherent to the town of Foxborough. It's essentially what they're using to make this happen is calculations that are on a statewide level, and you're bird-dogged all the way through it by the state. Everything that we do on here has to be checked, rechecked. You take a simple thing like the back page with your town meeting certifications. Okay, it looks very simple right here, but then they want the backup. Well, let's see what the town clerk put in. I want to see those certified copies, okay? When it comes down to like your local receipts, okay, how come they're up 10% more on this line than they were last year? I need an explanation of that. All of this in the 2.5% calculation is all across the state. It's nothing that's like, I think when you go from town to town, a lot of people think that this is just the way we do it here. It's statewide as it's done. And the calculations are all on here. And this is what we'll base our new budget on for next year. And then, oh, I'm sorry. The other thing is, and again, this is part of your recap sheet, but this is showing you revenue uses and revenue sources from the 2 fiscal years. And again, these are all derivatives of this particular sheet. So if you look at your appropriations from 2019 to 2020, they're actually down, by the way. It's interesting to note that we did $86 million of appropriations in 19, and you did 84 in 2020. Your state assessments went down slightly, and you know what that is? That's the backside of your cherry sheet. When everybody sees the cherry sheet, they automatically think, oh, this is all money coming in, but there's a nasty side to it. It's the second page, and that's what they're charging us. Okay? The cherry sheet offsets, it's almost negligible. It's nothing to really talk about. Snow and ice, okay, between the two, the deficits, approximately the same. It depends on how much you go over on your snow and ice and the deficits in general. Allowance for abatements and exemptions. Last year was $1,124,000. We were estimating $1,100,000 this year. So this is sort of your raise. So you're down actually about $2.5 million for what you were raising from the year, or what you were using from the year before. So now let's look at the cherry sheets, the amount that came in. Okay, 11 million, down a little bit, about $23,000. Local receipts, we went from 11,296,000 to 11,371,000 in 20. I'm going to almost call that level. I mean, $74,000 difference. Total enterprise revenue, $8 million. This year it was 10. And I believe you've just to go back on that. I think you folks, or not you, but the Sewer and the Water Commissioners went up approximately 6%, or they've been on a revenue increase for the last year, based on a rate increase that they did a study on. The free cash is considerably down. We used $4,630,000 in 19, but we used $2,075,000 in 18. So we didn't use as much, anywhere near as much. I think it had to do with that, with your the big school project there. You sort of paid it down at some point.
Right, and Mr. Chairman, just to clarify that for everybody who's listening, is that it's not that our free cash position is down, it's that the use of free
The
cash
use,
was
yes.
down.
Yeah.
So I want to be clear
Thank
about
you.
that point.
Yeah.
So our free cash position is actually okay, it's just the fact that we used less
Right.
this year than we did last year, because we used a bunch to offset the cost of the borough school development process.
That's absolutely right. And then other available funds is also down considerably. What are other available funds? You reached into account A over here and you took some out. You reached into, well, not free cash, but maybe a stabilization, mitigation funds, et cetera, but you used a lot less of those this year as well, for 2020. So it's an interesting, you can see that that's down also by about $2,500,000. So essentially, the budget itself dropped from 19 to 20. And again, it's not this isn't necessarily in the nicest user fashion, but we'll get to that a little bit later.
Okay, so we'll go finish up, wrap this up. So page 12, you have the Proposition 2.5 and tax levy 10-year history. Real quickly, we'll just talk, because this comes up every year during abatement season. So the prior year levy limit is what was raised last year. Proposition 2.5 allows the cities and towns to add 2.5% to that number. That doesn't mean your tax bill is only going to go up 2.5% or anything like that. It's just one of those misnomer things that people just grasp onto, and they come in and they want to argue that their bill went up 4%, and it went up more than 2.5. So that's where the 2.5 comes in. Again, the town adds the new growth. That's all the new construction that went on over the last year. So, any of the new buildings in the community that went online, 22 Patriot Place, which is the new healthcare, floors 3 and 4 are occupied. So, that's new growth. That's new money that the town can capture now. Those are numbers that they put into that. Their numbers to get the final number at the bottom. The debt exclusions, so again, that's, like George was saying, that's any of the overrides, anything paying for the school, this town hall, anything like that would be inside that debt exclusion. And then you'd have the total levy available is what they're allowed to tax up and spend up to. The actual levy is shown there, the unused levy, so there is some unused money that is left on the table there.
50,000.
Yeah. And then you'll see the proposed rates there and how that money is all collected. Page 13, this is one of those largest property taxpayers in the town. So obviously at the top, you'll see Foxborough Realty Associates, which is all of the craft enterprises, Mayfair Realty, and you work your way down. It just gives you a general idea of their percentage of what they're paying towards that levy that we're collecting. So it just gives you a general idea of what people sometimes will ask that question. So the last couple of pages here. So you look on page 14, this chart shows the changes from year to year for the residential class. So go back to 2009 on the bottom of the page, you can work your way up, and you see up until 2012, that's when we had the split rate, and then you can see it fluctuating from there. And again, that's because over the year, we've balanced that increase to, again, for every class that we could tax to. The next page there, again, this is just, if you wanted to look at that, page 15, it's just a community comparisons. It's just one of those pages, again, people like to ask about. You can see the residential rates that the different the towns are paying. I know North Attleboro goes back and forth between a split rate and a single rate. They are at a split now. That's obviously because, I think they went to that rate because of the Emerald Mall is basically dying a slow death if you've been in it. So those are just one of those things, when it was first built, I mean, that was a boon to their town, but now it's there. You look at Sharon, everybody always wants to talk about Sharon. They don't have any commercial there. They don't promote commercial building, anything like that. Foxborough does. We're very business-friendly. Contractors and businesses love, I can tell you from experience, that people love to come to this town to do business. All the department heads, all the departments are very easy to work with, and I think it shows that, you have a lot of businesses coming to this town to set up shop. So it just gives you a comparison. So the last one page here, page 16. So this page here, this is, and I'd be remiss not to mention this is what we've been using over the last 7, 8 years now. And when I sat down with Hannah, who I can't say enough of all the work that her and Kelly did putting this all together, we sat down to go over this, and I was like, I need this page. And we actually reached out to the former finance director, Randy Scollins, who actually helped Hannah walk through this to create this, because this is really everything that we can see, the actual numbers of how is this impacting all the taxpayers. Again, after 2011, this just get really complicated, and I can't praise Hannah
And then our new town accountant, Marie,
yeah.
she
Yeah,
put
everybody.
extra numbers in for you, so you could see it from 2008, the long spreadsheet,
Yeah.
all the way up to 20, and so she worked on that. So
Yes.
thank you for that, Marie. That was very nice of her.
So this is where we come to now. So if you look at the very top, you'll see no classification. That's no split. That's going back to a single rate. And it just kind of gives you, that would be what the tax rate would be. I think I told you going back that we have historically gone for equalize or the same percentage increase for all the classes. And where you would find that one is if you look over on the left, you'll see 1.1995 CIP shift. That line there is what the Board of Assessors last week voted 3-0 to recommend to the Board of Selectmen. So we made that recommendation. We had very long conversations about it, and that's where we feel that is the most equitable way to tax the different classes in the community at a fair and equitable rate. If you decide that you want to accept that, what you would have to do is make a motion for the residential factor. So the number is in the right side, they're kind of bold. It would be the 0.943200. If you decide to vote on another one, you're actually voting on the residential factor, not that CIP shift. So just so you know that, when time comes for you to make that decision. So it's up to the board to determine whether or not the tax burden should be shifted. Once they decide in favor of the shifting, they must then decide how much the burden will be shifted, and that's where you will do that on this sheet here. The Board of Assessors is very mindful of the present state of the economy, and with this in mind, we voted again 3-0 of a shift of 1.199%, the residential factor of 0.9432. That's it from us.
All right, board, any questions?
I have too many, Mr. Chairman, but, because I want to review this and probably get back in touch with members of the assessors to get a clearer picture.
But the vote would potentially be tonight anyway, correct?
Right, we need to get tax bills out,
Oh,
Yes.
yeah, we need a
Yeah.
vote tonight.
Okay?
yeah.
Pick your top three, Ed.
Well, no, I think that I'd be willing to accept the recommendations of the assessors in general, just because they're experts to provide us information.
Question on one of the lines on the document. It says, "We were here originally targeted split."
That was the 2012 CIP.
Okay, that was.
Yeah,
back
we were
then.
here, that was that shift that year.
Okay.
It just shows you where we were, where we are today.
Okay. I wasn't sure where the comments are in it, like where you were
Yep.
maybe
So you
thinking for this year and then decided on the one above.
Yeah, so the other sheets that were in there, pages, these ones here, page 5-ish, and go down, you see, you have the current split, those are in high, red, just kind of just shows you.
Are yours in color?
Yeah.
Okay.
So then you have, if you started from the top, you have the no split equalized tax increase, that was voted last year. That was the 2019. The 2017 is the one below that. The one we voted last week is fiscal year 2020. The 2016 and 2018 voted split, we voted the same, that same line there. And back in 2011, we voted for that split, the last one there, the .935200. Just kind of gives you a general idea of where we were and
Yeah.
how we fluctuated.
Leah, you have any questions?
No, we had this before, so we took a look at things.
This is a public hearing. Anyone from the public have anything they'd like to add or any questions? All right, I'll accept them. Go ahead.
So just, not that I really want to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. Just to clarify, because I know people are looking at a lot of numbers here and trying to make sense of it and where we stand, because everybody likes to compare us to other towns. So on that sheet, there's a 15-town comp comparison. And if you look at the comparison, where we are with the surrounding communities, residential property values in Foxborough have gone up 4.22% year over year over the last 3 years. Our comps have gone up 4.27% year over year. So it's consistent. The average tax bill increase in the town of Foxborough has gone up 3.53% year over year over the last 3 years. The average tax bill of our comps has gone up 3.62% year over year. So in terms of dollars, our tax bills have gone up $454 over the last 3 years. Our comps have gone up $497 over the same time. So we're right in the middle. As a matter of fact, we're slightly below average in our comps with our tax bill. I think that's important to understand, that we're taxpayers too, okay? So we want to be mindful of where our taxes are going and how much we're charging. We're deciding on a tax rate. Your actual tax bill is based on your assessed value, not by any judgment by this board or the Board of Assessors. It's based on your assessed value. All we're doing is making a decision and determination on your tax rate. So I just wanted to point those things out. The information's here. You can do your own comparisons. And, Tom made a very good point about commercial business. If you look at our commercial tax rate, it's 7.5% below the average commercial tax rate in the comp study of the surrounding towns, which is huge. It's $1.42 per thousand below the average. So, yeah, we're friendly to business, and we show that with our taxes and, how we try to be as fair as we can with sharing the burden. So I just wanted to point those things out. I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to take up more time, but I think it was important for people to understand where these numbers are coming from and how they apply to us versus surrounding communities. So,
No, I think that's a great point. I'll accept a motion to close the public hearing.
Make a motion to close the public hearing?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I'll accept a motion to go with the recommendation.
Residential factor.
Yeah, of our committee. Do you have that residential factor, Ed? In a,
0.9432.
That's correct.
19,
.9432 residential factor.
Yes.
make a motion to follow the recommendation of the advisory board for a .9432 residential
Factor. Factor.
factor.
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? Thank you. Thank you very much.
There is two things that, I mean, I gave to Mike to sign on that, that has to do with that at the end of the
We
night.
can send it into the state.
Okay.
So signing.
It's within,
Yeah,
Yeah,
tonight,
yeah.
after the fact, though, you know.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Great job,
everybody.
Thank you.
Guys, great presentation.
Good job.
All right, Rotary traffic control plan. We're not that far behind schedule.
I didn't open my mouth.
Hello there.
Good evening. For anybody watching home, my name is Chris Gallagher. I'm the town engineer. I have Tim Thompson from Par Corp here with me, project engineer who's been working on the Rotary traffic project. We're here tonight to report on the trial basis that we began approximately 5 weeks ago. Give an update to the board, have a discussion about how those traffic changes have helped the common and the traffic moving around the common. And at the end of the discussion, hopefully move forward with an approval to implement the recommended changes from Par Corp. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tim.
Thank you, Chris. So good evening, members of the board. Again, my name is Tim Thompson. I'm a traffic engineer with Par Corporation. We've been working with the town on the traffic circulation improvements to the common for the last several months. Most recently, we've prepared a traffic report that has investigated the impacts of the temporary traffic circulation improvements. As part of this study, we have conducted a number of traffic observations since the trial implementation has been in place. Specifically, we've looked at the vehicle queuing and vehicle delay approaching the common from all roadways. We specifically looked at the weave maneuver on the School Street portion of the common as a result of the changes to the Main Street approach. We've also looked at impacts to neighboring side streets as a result of these circulation changes. As part of our most recent assessment, we've conducted a new series of traffic counts. They're consistent with the traffic counts that were performed back in May as far as the scope involved in those traffic counts. They included turning movement counts at each of the intersections of the common. They also included 48-hour continuous traffic counts on Market Street, Baker Street, and Railroad Avenue. We also collected any available crash data from the police department for the latest 5-week period. Given what we've looked at, I'm going to go through the findings that we've uncovered. I think most significant finding that we've had is the significant reduction in delay associated with the Main Street approach to the common. Before these traffic changes had been implemented, we were seeing queues in excess of 2,000 feet, vehicles taking about 4 or 5 minutes during the PM peak hour to get into the common. So that delay has essentially gone down to zero. From what I've seen out there in my observations, there's essentially no delay as you approach from that Main Street intersection. We've also looked at queue lengths and vehicle delays associated with the other approaches to the common, and those are fairly comparable to what we were seeing prior to the implementation of the trial period. We've taken a look specifically at the weave maneuver on the School Street section of the Common. As I mentioned, that has resulted. In our opinion, it's operating in an acceptable manner. I think it took a couple weeks for drivers to get used to that movement, and there's certainly a difference from the first week when that movement was occurring to how it's occurring now. Drivers are generally allowing vehicles to make that maneuver over from the inner lane into the outer lane with the proper use of turn signal and appropriate travel speeds. We have seen that movement being conducted again in an acceptable manner. We do acknowledge that there is we have seen some difficulty during heavy traffic periods with a maneuver from that inner lane into some of the driveways there on the western side of the Common, specifically the Judy's Flowers driveway. We have noticed that drivers continue to exit the Common from the inner travel lane when exiting onto Central Street. This is an issue that we noticed prior to this implementation, but it is something that we continue to notice. With the crash data that we collected from the Foxborough Police Department, there was one crash report that was completed that we received within that 4 or 5 week period. It was a sideswipe collision near the South Street, Central Street area. It was a crash pattern that we had seen prior to the installation of these temporary changes. I should also note that there were 3 other collisions three other crashes that were identified by the police department, but crash reports for those were not filed. They were not, the crashes were reported after the fact of the incident, so there were no details other than that they occurred within the Common area that we were able to obtain. Another important item to note is we have observed a reduction in cut-through traffic on Market Street and Baker Street. We've noticed an increase in traffic volumes on Main Street approaching, specifically during the PM peak hour, and a decrease in traffic on Baker Street and Market Street in the southbound direction that coincides with that same time period. So given that we're not experiencing the significant delays on the Main Street approach, we're seeing less vehicles travel over to those neighboring side streets and use those to cut through. So I can say that based on the traffic data that we have collected, there has been no traffic volume increase on Market Street, Baker Street, or Railroad Avenue. Our recommendation going forward to the town is to consider the permanent implementation of the traffic changes at the Main Street approach. Given the time of year that we are in right now, this is something that we don't anticipate to be installed until sometime in the spring. Essentially, that extends a portion of the trial period. And we also recommend to the town that they consider to investigate other safety accommodations within the Common, including pedestrian crossing locations and all other safety improvements at other intersections. So that summarizes what PAR has looked at within the last 4 or 5 week period.
Great. Any questions from the board? Yes?
So, it's great. Main Street, no traffic. Good job. South Street, not such a good job, particularly in the morning. So I'm going around the Common every single morning, coming from Mechanic Street, going around the Common, inside to outside, to get to South Street. So what I noticed was the location of the yield sign. It's in the exact same location where it was. So cars are coming up, they're yielding back by the gas station, and then they're just going. They're not slowing down once they get by the fire station, they're just going. And that's what's causing the problems from the traffic on the inner lane crossing over. If we move that yield sign further down, and I know it's just barrels, but that's gonna slow vehicles down as they're coming in. You gotta remember, it's still a rotary, so rotary traffic should still apply. The people in the rotary should have the right of way, not someone coming into the rotary. So you gotta slow those vehicles down a little bit. not to the point where, I mean, how much distance did you gain? 60 feet? Plus or minus?
Sure.
Okay? 3 car lengths, get them into that area, but they need to slow down to give those people an opportunity, particularly a bus, to get from that inner lane to the outer lane to get down to South Street. Other than that, I'm fully supportive of it. I think it was a great test, but I think you gotta slow down that traffic on coming from Main Street into the Common. And I think relocating that yield sign would probably do that. And then we gotta figure out how to get the traffic off of South Street in the morning into the Common.
The back entrance to the high school.
Yeah. Oh, there is one?
Chris, any,
No, I mean, I've used it a lot. My only concern is, no concern with Main Street. I think it flows great. I do agree, the South Street intersection where people are in the inner lane and taking the right onto Central, we need to address that somehow. So I don't know if you have a plan for that in the spring to do like another test thing. And then my only other comment is coming up from like the Doolittle home, the library up, it's a real tough intersection to get over into the inner lane. So we need to address that. I don't know.
Yeah, one of the things that will happen when we make it permanent is that where those barrels extend towards Bird Street to delineate the right turn movement, that'll get pulled back closer to the crosswalk. So we will gain another 40 to 50 feet for people to come off of Bird Street and get into the inside lane.
Okay.
So it will help. The trial obviously was make it as visible as you can. Once we make it permanent, it'll be that island will get pulled way back towards the crosswalk.
Yeah, I know
So
that
we will
the
gain some room there.
first couple of weeks, it was all kind of chaotic, but I think now that people are used to it, it seems like it flows really well.
That sign was a big help.
Yeah. Yeah, finding the right spot for the signs was key.
what's your plan for making it permanent?
So, I can purchase and install some rubber curbing with reflective striping on it, probably in the next 2 to 3 weeks. I'll work with Tim on the exact location of where that curbing should go. And then permanently, we would look at doing that first thing in the spring to do.
But this will be semi-permanent?
Yeah.
Take the barrels back
Right.
away? And,
Yeah.
Great.
It's a good way to do it too, because then you can kind of test it out with the semi-permanent stuff. Right.
Yeah,
Make sure
it's
it
a little bit
works.
more of an advanced
Yeah.
implementation.
Great. Any other further questions?
I have just some observations. So, and a lot of them I've kind of reached out to you already. So, like every change, I think there's positives and there's negatives. And I don't think anyone can argue that Main Street has definitely felt, traffic alleviated coming up. And I have to imagine, like I myself used to cut down granite or cut down, I haven't done it once. So I think it's definitely helped with the side streets. Where I'm having trouble, because I live off of South Street, so I do that weave quite often, is when traffic is free flowing off of Main Street, it can be a little difficult to get over in that weave. And I personally have seen, I feel like, an influx of people going from that middle lane out to Central Street because they're not able to make that weave or they just don't try. So they go straight from that inner lane out to Central Street. That's just my own personal observation. Another observation I've had, because I've purposely kind of gone up at the 5 o'clock time, Main Street's been okay, but then there's been a little bit of a backup actually on the Common right before the split. Have you observed that?
I have. Not more than maybe 4 cars or so.
Okay.
Just as traffic slows down. What I've seen out there with the weave, if you will, is almost like a zipper effect occur with cars alternating between the inner lane and Main Street traffic kind of merging into that outer lane together. And when traffic is heavy, I have noticed a backup onto the Common itself. I've also noticed that backup if a vehicle's trying to make a turn into one of the commercial driveways and has had to stop to essentially.
And is that
shorten
a
that
result that we want, though? Like, I have seen cars stop too. And is that Is that a desired result or no?
I mean, it's not a desired result, but it's
Happening. I mean,
It almost works as traffic calming.
yeah.
You
okay.
know, as the vehicles need to make that maneuver, they are slowing down. So where in some locations on a straightaway, you put a speed hump or a speed table, you know, that, where people need to make that maneuver, you know, in a shorter distance than they were used to, or they were used to just staying in the outside lane, you know, they have to slow down. They have to find that gap. And like Tim said, you know, hopefully, and what we've seen as, you know, the last couple of weeks is that people coming from Main Street are allowing that, you know, traffic from the inside lane to kind of maneuver over. So, no, you're not looking for traffic to stop going around a rotary or a roundabout. But it does act in almost a traffic calming manner.
Yeah. I have had luck too getting from Bird Street over. I personally have done it a handful of times and I haven't, like I've kind of braced myself to get up there, but you know, I found a gap and it's been okay. My only concern would be that, you know, there's obviously a restaurant going in there, and do you think that we are a little early making a permanent adjustment knowing that there's big change going on right where that adjustment is?
I mean, one of the items that we looked at initially was how the restaurant was going to, how traffic volumes associated with the restaurant were going to impact how we felt the common was going to be operating, and we included those additional traffic volumes into our model, and we're essentially getting similar results to without having those volumes in there. So I can't say that we have looked at that future scenario and have felt that it's going to operate in a comparable manner.
Okay. Yeah, because, you know, I know if Judy's is having trouble right now, that could be more traffic cutting through hers to kind of get back up and around, you know, to get into things that are on that particular street that's now one way. So, you know, definitely pros and cons. It's a balance.
Right, exactly.
All right, accept the motion.
I had one more question. That crash data that we've seen, so essentially, we know that there's 4 crashes.
Yes.
I know there was another one on Friday night because I drove by it. So is 5 crashes on the common typical? More? Less? Do we know?
I think we do have the
I'm
police chief
looking right
here.
past you to the
He did
expert.
give me some numbers before we came up, so I will just let him speak on
Because
that.
I saw another one Friday night around 6:15.
So on my way up here, I said, geez, that's only 1 year. What's the comparison? So I went through all of the accident reports one by one for 2017 and 2018 for the exact same window. So in 2017, we had 2 full accidents that required accident reports, which damage was greater than 1,500. We had a hit and run, and then we had 2 other accidents where there was a paper exchange. In 2000, that was 2017. 2018, we had 1 accident, and then we had 3 accidents with paper exchanges. So the numbers are
Even keel, right on par.
right on par, so we haven't increased anything by any means. And actually, I think the 4 that you have, one of them is just really a stretch of an accident. Someone might have scraped my car. Someone just called the station, but we did log it.
Great, thank you. Thank you for being prepared.
Yeah.
But he was a Boy
I don't want to
Scout.
get asked that question.
All right, I'll accept the motion to approve.
Make a
Traffic
motion to approve the traffic recommendations.
Second.
All those in favor?
And I'm just, with everything going on with the restaurant and everything, I just think we're a little bit early, so I'm going to go against it.
4-1. Great job, guys. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The second part of this section was also 50-minute parking signs on South Street. Paige, we're going to talk to you about that? Sure. All right. So just as a little bit of a background, we took away a lot of those parking signs. And since then, it's really come to our attention that those 3 businesses right on South Street are in and out businesses. And the thought is maybe to put a couple of 50-minute parking signs back up there on their side of the street.
Sure. Well, I think, thank you, Paige Duncan, Planning Director. I think those are valid concerns, and where I run into, so Chris and I were just talking about it, we're doing all this with data now, and I think we're kind of probably echoing what Leah's going to want to say is, we don't disbelieve that this might be a problem. We feel like that there might be a need for some data or some process, because how are we going to decide when 15-minute signs are warranted? We just went through all this effort. We had committee members meet. We did all this sign plan, and now suddenly, anecdotally, people want signs back. We get it. So I think perhaps you guys need to come up with a policy and/or a way of measuring and evaluating that, so that it's not arbitrary, it's not subjective, and that you actually have a way of evaluating it.
So did we get a request, or is this just an anecdotal?
We did.
No, we got-
So,
Yeah, we did.
in particular, Comey's Cleaners, you have Comey's, you have the liquor store, and you have South Street Pizza. There's 3 spots in front of those 3 establishments, and those 3 spots, from what I've been told, people that work at other businesses on the common are parking there all day long. So it's not fair, and I happen to use Comey's Cleaners. I had to park on the inside, just to run in and drop off my dry cleaning, which is fine. I don't mind doing that. But, earlier we said we're business friendly. There's another way of being business friendly and being supportive and allowing businesses that don't have a big window of customers to be able to park. It's just drop off, run in, run out. We need to support them, because if you can't park to go to the cleaners, you're gonna find another cleaner. And it's not fair. It's not fair. And believe me, I was fully supportive of taking down all the damn signs, because there was way too many.
Nice.
But now we gotta start looking back, and when businesses come to us and express concern, just like we did with Primo's, and I think Foxborough House of Pizza, we need to be cognizant of that. I'm not saying, we have to put all the signs back, no. But a spot in front of a business that has an in and out should get special consideration.
And I don't disagree. I just guess I get fear. I just would like to, and I sound anti-business, and I'm not. I just want to make sure that it's not just anecdotal. I mean, do they have evidence
I know
that these
where you're
businesses
coming
being
from.
blocked? I mean, what if Gunther Tootie's wants
Well,
now?
that's
So that's the hard
that's
thing.
where I've
is
been
like-
going, is I think,
But Gunther Tootie's, okay, you have a bunch of spots on both sides of
Yeah.
140. At that corner,
only
on
3.
South Street, you have 3 businesses and 3 spots in front of the businesses, plus you have 5 spots across 140.
And you have parking in the
I mean,
back.
yeah.
And you have parking in the back, which is difficult to get to. Now, one of the things that we're fighting with is with the liquor store, when they get a delivery, they don't go out back. They're
Exactly.
taking up two spots in front.
Or they block the street, from what I
Right,
hear.
but
shouldn't be
that's a
doing that.
separate issue.
Right.
But you have to take care of the businesses that have the in and out traffic right in front of their businesses.
And I had heard that during one of the events on the Common, that some of those spaces were blocked. And so that's also something I think when you guys are authorizing use, we might want to add to that policy, that any vendors or anybody, they can unload, but they do not park in any of the
Right.
spaces
Right,
around the
no
Common.
loading.
So I think we need to deal with it.
Right.
So I'm not here to dispute it. I'm just cautioning that
So I agree there
I
should be.
think there should be hard
There should be a
data.
policy, there should be a written policy, and I'm fully supportive of that. But, we don't move at lightning speed. So I think, in the interim, until we can put a policy together, it should come before the board on a case-by-case basis. And let's look at it that way in the interim. But I think we do need to have a written policy in place with certain criteria that we still need to develop.
So I think with that in mind, I think using this instance as almost as a trial, as a setup to see what should that procedure be. I think it should be that a request is made. The town needs to look at that, to see who's parking there. If somebody is parking there all day, we had a case at one of the other 15-minute parking spaces where it was the business owner who was parking in front of his own place for 3-4 hours. And then there was complaints that, well, that spot's being taken up.
So who do they call?
Sometimes it's us.
That's the question, all right. so-
Sometimes it's, sometimes it's the town manager's office.
Does the Common Business Collaborative have a voice or an opinion on this? Because these are all common-based businesses.
They're not all represented, though, I would say. So
No.
there's a group of people that go to those, and it might be the Grace Church that's down the, like, there's not a good representation, and
Who's here, though? Is anybody? Bill. Never mind. We have one member here.
so on the flip side, I would say, I think there needs to be a process. I think there needs to be a policy. I think there actually needs to be a form that someone has to fill out. It's on our meeting agenda, whether it's an action item or something. But I do worry about a little bit of a slippery slope. So like Paige, I am completely pro-business. But how do you tell Comey's they get a spot, but the eyelash girl who has someone in there for 45 minutes doesn't get a spot, or someone at Gunther Tootie's doesn't get a spot?
We're talking apples and oranges. I'm sorry. A drop-off for a cleaners is different than getting your nails done or
Well,
your
Gunther
eyelashes.
Tootie's, even when Sam moves to Central Street and he's got an in-and-out business, and it irks me, everyone's heard me say this, that we have 4 15-minute signs in one block from 9 to 9 every day for 2 businesses that are closed on Sunday. So,
I don't
it's
disagree with you
just
there. but
looking.
Again, we're talking
I
about.
let you have your second, so.
We're talking about a drop-off business, okay? Sam's, it's gonna be a sit-down restaurant. So,
Well, he's closing his pizza shop, though, and gonna have his takeout from over there, so.
So once it just-
I'm for it. I'm
Right.
just about, not that we make an anecdotal comment and then we whip up a 15-minute sign for an arbitrary number of spots for, a time frame that doesn't make sense. So if it is for that business, it's look at the days, look at the times, and not just, put up a sign.
And that's where, like, even nowadays with cameras and stuff, I mean, they could put like a camera on those parking spots for 24 hours and we could see it. So that's why I guess we're saying, like, from a data perspective, it's like, what is the real problem? What is causing it? When does it happen? And that sort of thing. So I understand what you're saying, but I just don't know. I do think it's a slippery slope. And again, Sam's going to be opening Gunther Tootie's. Whenever I go to Gunther Tootie's, I'm in and out in literally 5 minutes. So
Yeah. And, I've observed a lot of business owners, especially on Mechanic Street, and they're not necessarily the businesses that you would think. There are a lot more office-type businesses that people are parking on the street. So really, the business owners have to get together and, almost come up with a plan. And it's more than the business collaborative, because you have people that go to those meetings, but maybe it's a different meeting that we try to get everyone together. Maybe Wednesdays at 7:00 doesn't work, or, whatever it is, we come up with another time to try to get businesses on board. And, if we give someone a 15-minute sign, maybe we look at, where are your employees parking? What are they doing to help, come to a solution?
Mr. Chairman, this is an interesting issue because I'm inclined to agree that those signs are needed. I will tell you that my observations is that if you go look at those 3 businesses, they are in-and-out businesses, and they're the only in-and-out businesses along that strip. The only other space is the mechanic, who's actually just beyond that area. He has his own spaces in front, anyways. Now, when you go along Central Ave, Central Street, there are multiple spaces along that strip on both sides of the road, and I've yet to see anybody who really has had not an opportunity to park there. You go out there any time of the day, and you can find places to park. But even if that were the case, and you needed 15-minute spaces, that's not a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
This is because if people are going to run in and out for a few minutes, don't forget the signs that were there before were 1 hour parking. That didn't make sense to me either in many cases. I think the businesses that are clearly along that place, and I agree, if there's a guy loading and unloading in front of his store right there, he should be out of there. He should not be there and doing that. All loading should be done to the rear of the property and done at all times, regardless of what day or time it is, because that's taking up spaces that need to get used. So I think the idea of putting the camera on it, I think I think you can do that, but I think you put the 15-minute signs in place to first, because you're hurting the business if you don't do that right
And
away.
who's doing that? Them or us?
I
The
think
cameras?
we would have to put a camera on it. Do we have the ability to do that?
I don't know if it's us or them. I mean, it depends on what the board is going to require for data when you
Yeah.
apply. You know, I don't know what, we're not there yet. So
Yeah.
but to kind of figure out how to justify.
I think we need a chance, the town needs a chance to look at it and see, are there actually people parking there all day? What's the data behind that? Or is it just a perception that somebody's parking there all day? And we go through this with speed limit studies. You know, there's a perception that people are going 50 miles an hour.
Right.
And everybody's going 50 miles an hour.
Right.
You know, we've seen it with the chief and the presentations and the reports that he's done. So I think from the town side, my recommendation was, if your next meeting's in 2 weeks, give us 2 weeks to look at it and actually see, is there a problem? Or is it just a perceived problem?
I think one of the reasons why, timing-wise, what happened, why it's all coming ahead now, is we took the signs down, and that very next weekend was a fair at, in the center of town, and with those signs not there, people that had booths at the fair were parking all around the Rotary. And I know one of the things when we have our Thursday,
Farmers market.
Huh?
Farmers market.
Farmers market, I think specifically they say you have to park at Town Hall, you can't park around the Rotary.
park around the Rotary.
And I don't think this fair did. So that's sort of what brought it to light, was just, bless you, was the timing. Took all the signs down, and then, those spots were taken for 8 hours during the day. But I would like to see a study done in the next 2 weeks, as you just mentioned. Let's see. Let's see. But I have to agree with Bill. I'm in favor of putting 15-minute signs up in that stretch right in through there. So can we throw it back in?
I'm not sure the recommendation is to not do signs until we have data in 2 weeks?
That would,
And have a process. I would be in favor of having data, having a process, an application.
well, I say I don't think let's get the data first.
Yeah.
I don't think we could we have time to put a process
I mean,
together. and
I
a
think
form
we can work
together.
on writing a policy or just a
policy.
procedure.
Yeah.
Of
Quick
one-
little, like a paragraph,
No.
not
Yeah.
too long.
Yeah, it's not going to be a long.
I don't think we have to apply that to this case, but I think give us
Going
2
forward.
weeks to actually figure out what we're looking for data. You know, is it a real problem versus a perceived problem?
Yeah.
And let us
And we're
write
saying
something
3
up or
spots
propose
because there's
something.
3 spots there. Is that the right number of spots? Is it 2? Is it 1? Is it 4? I just want to be really careful. I'm not trying to be difficult. I just want to be careful about throwing signs up that don't make sense, because once they're up, and Paige and I have talked about this, and Chris, they're hard to come down because there's an expectation that it's there, and it might be Central Street, it might be the theater, I'm there dropping off my kids, it's a pain, they might want 15-minute spots. I think it's just having a policy, having a procedure so that it's fair and equitable to all the businesses that are sharing the parking uptown and working together.
I'd like to see some data in the next 2 weeks. Can we do that? Great. Okay, we'll put you on the agenda for 2 weeks.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
We got a public hearing for the 99 restaurant. Need a public hearing?
The Board of Selectmen, acting as local licensing authority pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 138, will conduct a public hearing on Tuesday, November 26, 2019, beginning at 8:05 p.m. in the Gala Meeting Room, Town Hall, 40 South Street, on the change of officers and ownership/beneficial interest for an annual all-alcohol beverage restaurant license for 99 Restaurants of Boston, LLC, DBA 99 Restaurant and Pub, 4 Fisher Street, manager Paul Tellier. All interested parties are welcome to attend.
Okay, so this is just a change in corporate offices, but because there was a change, we also have to recognize that, if I'm correct, Bill?
That's right.
So it's more pro forma.
It is.
Than anything. We didn't even need the 99 to be here for this. But it is a public hearing. Any questions from the board first? No? Public hearing, anything from the public? I'll take a motion to move the public hearing. To close the public hearing.
Make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Make a motion to accept.
Make a motion to accept the request for the change of officers and ownership beneficial interest for an annual alcoholic beverages restaurant license for the 99 Restaurants of Boston, LLC, DBA, 99 Restaurant and Pub.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Great. All right, public hearing for the high school Super Bowls. Moving along, give
Let me find
Ed a second to catch that one.
The Board of Selectmen, acting as the local licensing authority pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 140, Section 181, and Section 183A, and Chapter 136, Section 4, Code of the Town of Foxborough, Chapter 229, and also Stadium Rules and Regulations, will conduct a public hearing on Tuesday, November 26, 2019, beginning at 8:15 p.m. in the Gala Meeting Room, Town Hall, 40 South Street, to review the application submitted by NPS LLC for the 2019 MIAA High School Super Bowls. This event is proposed for Gillette Stadium. Application for this event is on file at the Office of Selectmen. All interested parties are welcome to attend.
All right, welcome.
Thank you. Randy Briggs, Stadium Advisory Committee.
Phil Buttafuoco, representing NPS and KSE, Craft Sports and Entertainment.
Okay. You're up.
The Stadium Advisory Committee met on the 11th and went through with public safety officials and other officials from the town, as well as representation from Gillette. And this being the 13th year of the event, we expect everything to go smoothly, and our recommendation is for approval of the application.
Any questions from the board? This is the 13th year. It's a wonderful event.
Yeah,
It's great.
It's a great event.
Yeah, no, it's outstanding. This is a public hearing, so anyone from the public want to speak? Hearing none?
Mr. Chairman, so is it just two nights or one night, one day?
It is 2 nights.
Two nights, so it's
Friday,
gonna be
Saturday.
Friday and Saturday.
It's
Okay,
Friday
so-
night, 2 games, and then Saturday.
6 games.
Okay, 6 games, okay.
Are they all of the Super Bowls being played there this year?
Correct.
Good,
Yeah.
that's good.
Yeah, that's why they added Friday night, right? To get
Correct.
those extra 2 games.
You know what, they couldn't fit them all in
Yeah.
one day.
Yeah,
It's just too
it's
much.
true.
yeah.
True.
Motion to approve MPS,
Close the public.
I'm sorry, make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye. Make a motion to approve NPS LLC application for the Maya High School Super Bowls at Gillette Stadium with event dates of Friday, December 6, 2019, and Saturday, December 7th, 2019.
Second.
All those in favor? Awesome.
Thanks, Phil.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow,
2
Doc,
minutes ahead.
Well done. Well done.
pretty impressed, Doc.
All right, 8:30, the 2021 budget and goals. So, Bill, you're up. This is sort of a recap, a follow-up to our meetings with our other boards.
That's correct.
Do you have to sign in?
So I just wanted to call to order a meeting of the advisory committee.
Anybody second?
We also need to do the same.
Yep.
Can I get a motion to open our meeting?
I make a motion to open the school committee meeting. Second.
Thank you.
All righty, we're good. We're all here. Awesome. Spread out, but here.
Good turnout for before a holiday, too.
All right. So good evening, everyone. Thank you all for being here tonight, and thanks the board. I want to thank the board for hosting this meeting. Tonight, we'd like to do a number of things. First is to go over the financial forecast and then I'll talk about vision statements, budget guidance, and budget calendar for this upcoming year. But before I did that, I actually went back and I wanted to follow up on the meeting that we had a few weeks ago, which I thought was great, by the way. I really thought it was great to have everybody here, talking in the same arena, talking about the same goals and objectives, and trying to get to the same point so we can actually put together a good process for this upcoming year. So I just want to summarize some of the things that we found from that discussion, because that night we heard a lot of different input from different folks in different groups, and I just wanted to get get back to you with some of those findings, and they're pretty general in many ways. But the summary was that what's the best practices that you have seen in any, if any, in establishing priorities in a budget? And one of the things that came up was identifying needs versus wants seemed to be identified as a common theme throughout the discussion from all the groups that were here. Seeking input from residents and stakeholders early in the process was also identified. Under budgeting revenues was also highlighted as a good budgeting tool, and you'll see that we actually are doing that in this case. Looking forward and looking back was important in determining how to best prepare a good spending plan. So we've done that as well in this process, and you'll see that in the budget forecast as we go forward. What do you recommend as a process to set priorities in the FY21 Foxborough budget? Surveying residents and having open forums on setting budget priorities was mentioned a few times as a good process for establishing priorities. Better sharing of information was also highlighted as a good tool for establishing priorities, and to look at what has worked well over the years in areas that could use improvements. With respect to information that was received from residents, employees, and other board members, some of the common themes of their responses were as follows. What process would you as residents like to see as enacted as the greatest amount of input in the budget process? And improved communication between all levels of the budget process was identified. This was important so that this could reduce the amount of questions asked at the town meeting. What was the best practices have seen in any priorities, if any, to prioritize budget items? More and better engagement with the public was a common theme with both groups. This includes better education and orientation to members of the public so that they understand how decisions and recommendations are made. So one of the things that one of the department heads came up with this past month, Mark Craig has witnessed in another community, was that that community put together what is known as a forum. So it was sort of like a education forum for the public, in which they taught people how the budget process actually works. Because there's a lot of different moving parts to that process. Most people don't only see the end product, they don't actually see how it actually works, and so like seeing how the whole process comes together. And there's a number of different steps to go through that to reach that point. There's a lot of misinformation that gets put out, unfortunately. In some cases, people see things or read things on social media which is not accurate, not in 10 situations. But they also get information that from some reading sometimes it's just not accurate, and they just want to make sure, we want to make sure that we get the right information out to people. During the past year, I witnessed a number of instances where incorrect information had been put out to the public, which really changed the perspective that some people had as to how they were going to vote on the budget this upcoming year. So we've managed to look at all those different issues, and each one of them we've managed to correct them because the information was simply incorrect. So we're going to start out this way this year by being as open with the process as we possibly can, to try and give information to people straight out of the gate so that they know exactly where we're coming from, and there's no surprises in any part of the process. So what I'd like to do at this point is to start with the financial forecast. I'm going to turn it over to George Samuel, who will actually get into that discussion, and I'll switch back to the. Sorry, is that next one? Okay. Here we go.
Yeah, they're in here. Yep.
So you have.
George, can I have a paper one though?
I kind of like paper too.
Yeah, I'll go paper. Kill a tree.
Can you paper one?
One more. Thank you.
There we go. Oh.
Thanks.
Save my eyes.
We at, oh, here, how come I didn't come up? Are we back on that,
Yeah, same thing again, so.
we get all the way out of the thing and just go into the, there you go, minus that, and then, okay, the yellow thing, I think? The yellow folder? Oh, no. Yeah.
Yeah, just take a look at the revenue projections, right?
Yeah, I think, but it's still coming out. I think you want to kill the PowerPoint, because it's still staying on PowerPoint.
Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful.
There we
Okay,
go.
there it is. Okay.
A new IT guy.
There's
Too many different pages.
a couple of, about a half hour ago, we went over the tax rate and the tax classification hearing. And I think I mentioned during that particular point in time that your recap sheet is in fact the final synopsis of everything that happened during the course of the year. Well, if that's the case, then the recap sheet, if you mock it up, should be the basis for the budget that you're going to be doing the next fiscal year. Oftentimes I've found in the past that when we sit in various rooms talking about your budget, we look at it like, almost like an engine where one minute we're talking about a carburetor, the next minute we're talking about a fan belt, and then the next a radiator, but nobody ever actually sees the whole engine as it works. So one of the things I've done in the past is I mock up the recap sheet, and that's the basis for where we would begin. And only it's in a much more user-friendly fashion than perhaps the way it was showing up on the state piece. Starting with the fact that we start with the revenues and then we go into the expenditures rather than having the expenditures on top and then trying to wrap the revenues around it. So the thing that I've passed out to everyone here is a beginning or a mock-up of the tax rate recap for this year. So I'll come out of the gate saying that this is a fluid document which will continue to move and will become solid next year around this time when we lock in the tax rate. That's when it finally becomes the final piece. But different things will move as we go along. So let's start off with, the page one of the revenue sources. Essentially, there are 4 revenue sources that a town gets its money from. I don't know. Hopefully, it's just a. Yeah, it just died. I talked too long.
Oh.
Okay, so you just got to sign
Okay,
back in.
no problem.
There are 4 revenue sources that a town gets its money from. The first is the tax rate, which is near and dear to everyone's heart. The second is state aid. And the third is local receipts. Now, there is a fourth, and that is existing money that we cannibalize for the budget in any one particular year. So let's start off with the tax rate. A few minutes ago, they were talking about new growth. They were talking about the 2.5% increase. So if you look at this particular piece, and it says tax levy for 2021, okay, what you do, you're starting with your prior year's levy limit. It was $49,768,000. They allow you the 2.5%. This is nothing more than a calculation of 2.5%. And here is your new growth. Where do you get that new growth figure from? If you take a fast look over the past several years, okay, the new growth that we've had, here's like a little pie chart that goes out. You can see that, way the heck back in 13, we were at 518,000, 576, 674. It really grew right here. Then suddenly it's like 9, bang. This is a big one. This was a big year. So averaged out, it's about 947,000. Does that mean that that's solid? No, but again, going back into what Bill was talking about a little bit earlier, we want to be conservative on what we're coming up with. We don't want to overestimate the new growth for next year, so we've averaged it out. Now, it might move up, might move down, but that's where this particular document becomes fluid. The other piece that is not fluid at this point is this is your debt exclusion. Very interesting point. Notice there's a place here for an override. Okay, and there's 0 in there. Look at where that is as opposed to a debt exclusion. The override, if you vote an operational override, gets calculated into your bottom line and becomes part of that for the rest of eternity, unless you do an underride. On the other hand, if you do a debt exclusion, you calculate up what your tax rate's going to be or the levy limit's going to be, then you add the debt exclusion for that particular fiscal year. Now let's talk about that debt exclusion. Here's a number of the things that you've excluded from the tax rate. Library renovations, high school, new public safety building, landfill, a Hearn school, there were 2 of them, and new public safety building, to the tune of about $2,180,000. The nice part about a debt exclusion is that it disappears. Once these bond issuances, which is like a coupon that you would pay on your home, disappears, the debt exclusion disappears. And it is not calculated into the bottom line of your recap sheet to go on for eternity. It's gone after that particular point. So this is where, right now, this is actually a solid number. It's based on numbers that we've already got in our bond issuances. So we've got a total possibly next year, if our new growth is correct, or in around correct, of about $54 million would be your tax levy. Maximum allowable, if you will. Now you come to your cherry sheet. Some of you are probably looking at that and saying, wait a minute, wasn't the cherry sheet last year $11 million or something to that effect? It was. But there's this infamous page on the back there where you see the charges. This is net of the charges. Okay, well, where's he coming up with the cherry sheet or the state aid? It kind of goes like this. And of course, here is an estimate of all the, this is 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. And it says the differences in the average. And of course, let me just make this a little bit bigger here, because the bottom line, which is what we're looking for, is off the chart. Let me see. It's this number right here that we want to format and auto-fit it. Okay, wait a minute. I don't know why this went the way it did. Okay. So I'm pulling this off. This is an average of what we've been taking in, netted out for the last 5-6 years. All right, about $8,537,000. Very interesting point here. The state aid, if you probably went back to 2009, is probably lower than where it was. Around that period of time, 2008, 2009, we get the rug pulled out from under us, not only here, but the state decided to start pushing everything towards the urban areas, and they dropped your cherry sheet a whole load. And right now, I'm going to say, even though this is just an average of what we've gotten, I'll bet you it's lower than where it was about 10 years ago. Now you come to your local receipts. The local receipts are all the things that we take in besides the tax rate. So if you start taking dog licenses, one of the larger pieces is your motor vehicle excise, dog licenses, building permits, various things that are pilot programs, et cetera, et cetera. So right now we've got about $11 million coming in from there, and we can probably say, we go right over to here. State aid, let's go over a little bit more. How was it? Debt exclusion. Levy limit. Well, for some reason here, I don't know why I'm not getting my my local receipts, but we've actually put out the local receipts. and done them up for the last several years. I'm actually predicting a local receipt level to what we've done this year. And this is really 2 years from now. Why the heck I can't get back, I don't understand here, but sheet 1, sheet 2, recap sheet. Oh, here we go. Let me limit 2020 projection. All right, now, the next piece of this becomes your available funds. Other available funds coming from, this is basically what you used last year. You took ambulance funds for $1,158,000, and you also took recreation revolving funds for $59,000. And I have a feeling that if anybody here is looking at it, they're going to say, wait, wasn't that a lot higher? Didn't we do a lot more with the CPI? And you actually did. You actually used a lot more money. But right here, we're trying to predict what the budget should go up. And this is, I'm only taking things that are raise and appropriate. Anything else that we do from here on in, we're going to be using existing funds, free cash, stabilization fund, mitigation fund, wherever it's coming from, XYZ fund. That's where the money's going to come from. Now, there's something very interesting on here. See this water budget and enterprise fund receipts? They're exactly the same down here. Those two are a wash account, meaning whatever that you raise for your water, unless you're subsidizing it, should be the same amount that you're going to get on the bottom. The revenue should equal the budget. So whatever happens, if that goes up to $7 million for your water account, then it becomes $7 million down here. It's not going to have an effect on the top or the bottom. So right now, we're looking at revenue sources for next year at about 84 million bucks. Now, what about this? This is total appropriations for the budget. This is what you spent last year for the raise and appropriate portion of the 2000 budget. Just those pieces that you raised and appropriated. Doesn't include any of the CPI things that you transferred money in from anything else. Snow and ice deficit, that's an average of the last 5 years. Could be higher, could be lower, but it gets us off to a good start. Overlay abatements and exemptions, this is what we just did for this particular budget here. Okay, the 2020, it was on there as $1,100,000. So again, you're sitting up here with $80 million of expenditures. So what do we got right now? Well, an excess or a deficit of $3,476,000. Now, what's the other thing that we've done? OPEB every year, $900,000 so far. That's the beginning. Now, I think the first thing Bill said to me, well, wasn't that a little bit higher? Again, this is only the part that you're using from the raise and appropriate section. This is the part that you're taking from your meals tax. And then CIP, we used a little bit of raise and appropriate last year to the tune of about $200,000. Again, you might decide, everybody's going to come out and say something like, well, maybe we want to put in 3. That's okay, we adjust from there. Maybe you're going to say we don't want to put any of it in there. You zero it out and you've got a little bit more. When this is all done, you have something like $2,376,000 to operate with next year. What is that as a percentage? It's about 3.3619, or comfortably you could go 3.5%. Again, every one of those numbers that I just brought up is relatively conservative. We haven't gone overboard on any of these things. Most of them are sort of underfunded to make sure that we're not going to run ourselves into some kind of a deficit. So right now, if we were talking, the recommendation would be we can probably raise the budget about 3.5% for next year. And then again, as we go along, depends on what we're gonna do with the other thing, the capital and what have you. There'll be more things, but whatever happens from here, if we're gonna raise it for a new truck, and we're gonna use some free cash, we'll use free cash on it, but it'll be neutral on it, because you're gonna bring in the revenue and you're gonna put it out all at the same time. One last thing that I'll note, which is a very important piece to this. Right here. Notice it says free cash, 0. You folks, and rightfully so, have not been utilizing free cash for your operating budget over the last number of years. As well, you should not. All right? You begin doing something to that effect, you've got a problem. You will create a problem where you have to keep chasing the same money over again. So all your free cash has been put towards one-time items, maybe funding a capital project, which has a foreseeable ending to it. All these pieces have been done outside of the raise and appropriate section. And so, good move, because you haven't set yourself up for a fall in the future. So if we take this particular piece and look at this as the engine for next year, as we go along, all these numbers will change. Maybe somebody will come back and the assessor say, wow, looks like we're gonna have a huge year next year. Maybe we're gonna have a massive new growth or something. It's gonna be $1.2 million. Then we change this number and the bottom line changes. And things can go up or down as you said. But right now, we have approximately $2,376,000 more to work with than what we had last year. And at that point, that's about 3.5% to go up on.
I might be mistaken, but hasn't our budget gone up between 4% and 5%?
Well, yes. But what we're doing is establishing where do you want to start this year?
Yeah, okay.
And we want to start in or around 3.5%. Now, that doesn't mean that the revenues won't come in at 4, maybe 5.
They may come in higher.
They may come in much higher. I mean,
Yeah.
again, hopefully they don't come in lower.
Yeah.
But we're trying to establish where do we want to be when we set this budget up. So if we say 3.5%, and we've got 4 or whatever, then there's some discretionary room there to decide where you want to go.
But should we budget higher than what we know to be? Why I'm asking is because, so the former finance director would give us, like a 5-year or a 10-year view. And if I recall, 2020 to 21, he predicted to be a tight year.
Mm-hmm.
So if the money there is like 3.1% and we have been growing 4 to 5%, isn't that worrisome?
Why? I mean, I think I think you're misunderstanding, because what we're saying is we want to grow the budget 3.5%. More than likely, the revenues that are going to support that budget probably going to be 4, maybe 5%. We're trying to keep what you want to move forward with below the amount of money that you're taking in. That way, I mean, there's plenty of room to move.
That's this $2,376,000.
Right.
So we don't want to budget more than that compared to what we already spent last year?
Right. In other words, you can go up from what you spent last year by about $2,300,000, or about 3.5%. And that's with a conservative estimate on what's probably going to come in. And if you utilize that, you are actually coming in under what you could spend. And this is where I think, and I'll let Bill talk on this, I don't want to steal his thunder, but I think that this is where you're going to go with your, how you want the departments to put in. You could say, you've got 3 different ways of doing it, and it leaves some room to say, okay, let's start with 3.5%, but then give us an adjustment, and I'll let Bill talk on that. But this is leaving you some room so that you're not right up against the edge, because I'm pretty sure these numbers are going to be much higher as to what you've got coming in. And by the way, what happens to, when you underestimate your budget, it becomes free cash. If you take in more money in your local receipts than what you've predicted, where does it go? It becomes free cash. And it gets put into the free cash, and then you use it again later on. If you've got more state aid, it becomes free cash. Conversely, if you've overestimated and it comes in, then you've got a problem because you've got to go back and cut the budget at this particular point. I'm sorry, yeah? Go ahead.
Hey, George.
Yeah.
So if the estimated number right here is 2.376 surplus, right?
Well, just to work with, yes. Right.
Just to work with based
Right,
on estimates.
right.
We don't know what the revenue growth will be, right? But if we end up close to these numbers, what are the implications of not spending that 2.376 and perhaps doing an underride on that 2.5% ceiling?
Well, here's the issue that I think I have, and again, and underrides have been done, okay? And if that was the case, well, all right, so let's distinguish something. A real honest-to-God underride is a procedure just like an override is. You don't go to a town, and just say we're going to, underride. You have to go through a procedure the same way you would with an override, okay? The implications of not using or going up to the levy limit that you have is like this, and see if you can follow my thinking. Do you know the OPEB? Okay, other post-employment benefits. Essentially what that is a reaction by a higher governmental thing of, let's say, inefficiencies over the last 50 years. We've all heard the story about Social Security. They've raided all the money out of it. Okay, taken all the money away, and well, you won't be around. You won't be getting any of it when you go to retire. Well, essentially, as an accountant, I believe that OPEB should be fully funded. I believe that each of the county retirements should be fully funded. But the issue that you've got in this particular case is this. This should have been done 50 years ago. And what ends up happening is they waited 50 years to come to the startling revelation that we should have a fully funded system. By the way, here's a bill for $50 million. Pay it. Now, for the town of Foxborough, you're one of the few towns that have actually put a dent in this thing, okay? But if you were in some of the towns that I've been accustomed to working with, make it 50 billion, we ain't got it, all right? So now when you're asking about what would happen if we don't go to the levy limit, you can hold it down and everybody gets a little bit of a kick this year. And you can do it again the next year and the next year. And then suddenly you're going to come to the conclusion, we're way behind the 8 ball, boards will change, and then suddenly you'll make a jump up 7, 8, 9, 10%, and the guy on the other end is going, what happened? I thought I was here, and now I'm suddenly here. Same situation. This is where again, it's a situation in the town. I don't live here, and I don't have the right to tell somebody that's paying the taxes, well, I wouldn't do that if I were you. Okay, but if you don't do it as a full-fledged underride, then you're risking this shift that tends to be very hard on a person that might not be ready for it.
So just one follow-up question there. So you already listed the OPEB commitment as 900,000. Is that based on the last couple of years? Is that where you're getting at?
There is a what do we want to call it? An actuarial study. And by the way, the 900 only is the piece from the meals tax. It's about 964 or something like that. There was 2 other pieces that comes 967. So what you have been doing for the last number of years is paying this OPEB. And by the way, we got about $10 million in the account right at the moment. So you've put a huge dent in that number, okay? And I mean, you're a country mile ahead of anybody else that I've been, whatever towns that I've been in the past. But yes, that number is predicated, just like your pension trust, you get a bill every year, okay? And you're paying it, and it's fixing the pension as we move along.
So instead of giving some of that 2.3 back in the form of a underride, the idea is that you would pay more into OPEB to reduce your payments moving forward.
Either you could do something like that. I'm not saying that that's the issue, but
No, just-
yeah.
So let me try to address that for you.
Right.
So the thing is that the $2.3 million is probably what you need to operate the town consistently for the
Right.
next year. Right? So that means that services will continue to operate as they normally have been operating.
Right.
Nobody will get laid off. People will continue to operate in a normal way. There may be some incremental ability to move up in some cases, but we'll still be able to make up OPEB payments. We'll continue to make our debt payments. We'll continue to make everything that we owe better in what we've been doing. Now, what's important to remember too, and I don't think we spent enough time spending on this earlier. It's really important. It's a very, really important issue. George pointed out the debt exclusion line, that $2.1 million, I think that was debt excluded. The town has not done a debt exclusion in almost 10 years. That includes the borough school, by the way. We did not exclude that debt. We're going to pay for that within the levy. Same thing with this building. We're paying for it within the levy. So which means that we're paying our way, and we're going to continue to pay our way if we continue to raise the amount of money that we're raising as we go forward. And what George said was really an important point. I actually witnessed this in the community where they didn't pay to the full levy amount, and what they did, they ended up with a 6 or 7 or 8% increase this current fiscal year. So it does come back to bite you if you're not careful about doing it the right way. Bill, you had a point?
And the other side you have to be careful about is first bond interest payment on the borough school
Right.
is not in this year's budget.
Right, it'll be in next year's budget.
So that's a portion that's gonna come out of this, 2.3 million. I think we'll probably have a first bond interest payment the second half of next year.
Next year, probably.
Correct.
So that's, not calculated.
Thank you.
Oh,
Do you
good.
know the dates of when these exclusions start coming off the books?
There is actually, I have a debt schedule. I don't have it with me, but it shows the payments as they go along. Well, actually, if you notice, this one here, this landfill closure, this just dropped off last year.
I was gonna ask.
Yeah.
It's zero now,
Yeah,
okay?
I think the other one, the current school renovation, I think drops off this year as well. It's upcoming year.
You can tell a little bit, I think most of it, and I'm looking at Bill Euchner on this, most of these been done for about a 20-year period,
15.
15, 20.
15 and 20 years.
Your fire station, your library, a number of those are actually current on the schedule, but you have things like the Ahern comes off, final Ahern comes off in 25.
That's a major.
We have a couple land acquisition ones that are going to be dropping off in 24. Most of the schedule goes off for a few more years. There's only a couple that are dropping off. The first renovation for the Ahern
Right.
drop off in 22.
Right.
You can kind of tell a little bit by the
Just looking at
dates,
the numbers,
like a
you see.
fifth month, third day of 10. So you already know that this one's already been running for at least 10 years, so it could go another 5 or 10, This is of 09, 04, so a lot of these are like Bill just said, they're gonna fall off.
The beauty of the bond schedule, though, is that not like your mortgage where it's the same rate for 20 years.
Right.
The bond schedule is a set principal rate, but interest dropping.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So
You pay
you're
most of
starting off paying $1 million, but 10 years in, you're paying $700,000.
Absolutely, yeah.
On the schedule, so the schedule drops that way.
Looks really, really well.
You good with this? I mean, do you want me to hit this? I mean, I don't want to screw you up with
No,
the...
no, thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
As it is, I'm having enough problems.
No, it's fine.
Challenged with the...
That's all right. So,
Okay,
let me just,
yeah, you want the...
yeah, we'll get back to this. Okay. So, one of the things I wanted to talk about tonight a little bit, let me just Let me go out of this for a second. The vision statements. So why did we do this? All right, well, last year, the one thing I noticed is that we were sort of going like in 3 different directions at times. And I think it was, and then it was something that I picked up as part of our leadership program this past year was that, it's really important that we as a community come together and start to look for alignments as to where we're both trying to reach the same goal and ultimately. And it's interesting to note that the only group that has actually done a vision statement is the school department. Selectmen haven't done one. I haven't done one. The AdCom hasn't done one. We've never done them. So why not start with that conversation? All right. So what I've done, and we haven't even finalized the discussion with us amongst ourselves. We just talked about it as a concept initially, but we need to have a better conversation about this. School department's already done. They even want so much as to establish a mission statement, which is even better. They went so far as to say, the Foxborough Public Schools will inspire our students to succeed and contribute to an ever-changing global society by fostering dynamic and integrated learning experiences. The mission statement is the key piece. The mission of the Foxborough Public Schools, guided by its core values and collaboration with the community, is to engage students in rich intellectual, artistic, and character-building educational experiences, which empowers them to become healthy, productive, responsible citizens, leaders, and innovators. But the issue is collaboration with the community. And if you see with all 3 of these statements that are being looked at, all 4 actually, one of the things we talk about is, while being responsible stewards of the financial resource of the community, plus we'll work with a diverse group of residents and stakeholders to get what we need. So we're not just thinking this stuff up on our own. We want people to give us the feedback as to what's really important for you. Same thing with the town managers. I take my direction from the Board of Selectmen. They tell me what's important for the community. I don't make that determination. They tell me, I just carry out the mission. They tell me what the mission is, I follow it. As far as the AdCom, this was something that I gave to Seth, and I said, can you take a look at this and come up with some ideas? The committee itself has not met on this yet, so they're going to have a conversation, and they're going to decide what's good for them. This isn't something that I want for them. This is something they need to come back to me with and say, look, this is how this fits in. This is how our role fits into this process. All right, so I thought they had a really good idea, a really good approach, and I thought it was a really good first attempt on your part, so I appreciate that. And you actually had 2 options, which I thought were both actually quite good in both cases. So I ask you to really get back with your committee and come back and try and get that nailed down, because this will really help the process as we go forward. And we're gonna put this on our agenda for the next meeting to have that conversation as well. All right, enough said about that piece. The next part of it is really is the part where we talk about the budget process, and actually what we talked about, what really is the budget guidance for the upcoming year. So there really are 3 options. You can do level funding, which is basically the same funding that we've done this past year. All right. Basically said strongly that level services will reduce given the current services, because the given increase in costs which occur every year. Situations do occur whereby costs do not increase universally, but costs such as wages, benefits, materials, contracted services often rise annually. Typical growth in budgets range from 3 to 4% per year. The statewide average is 4%. Statewide average is 4%. Right? Level services funding approved for budgets for current FY 2020 adjusted upward by 3 to 4% factor, which would result in level services. Basically, we're saying no real increases in services beyond what we currently have, and then we'll basically keep things as they are, accounting for the increases in cost of operations. And the third is level service with some limited enhancements, and this provides for incremental growth, annual growth in services, and some limited growth in budget and service levels in areas deemed prudent in towns by the town's budget architects. The budget architects are us. Collectively, it is us. George.
That's for the question in the back. This is what I meant by the 3 options, and I said I'll let Bill talk on them. So if what you're basically doing is setting your budget at approximately 3.5%, saying we've got this to work with.
Right.
But then you could come back on any one of these and say,
Right.
okay, come in with this, and then
Right.
give us what, you know, you might need a few things more, and then it's gonna be at the discretion of the department.
So-
I mean,
so-
AgCom and everybody that's involved.
So to take off on what George is saying is that we'll come in, we'll try and meet that that $2 million, not $2.4 million number in terms of how our budget's gonna grow overall. But at the end of the day, there may be times where people come before the budget, Board of Selectmen, myself, the AdCom, and say, you know what, we need some help in certain areas. And that'll be up to us to decide collectively, do we want to try address that? So it's really important that we put that out there and say, okay, you know, let's decide what's important for us. And so what my thought is to go forward on is a combination really of 3 and 2 together, is to say, okay, I can consider some enhancements in the budget growth, but overall budget should stay within a 3 to 4% growth factor. I'm saying 3.5% based upon what George is telling me, right? Bear in mind that our revenues could be growing at a 4 to 5% clip, but we're going to say 3.5% because we want to be conservative, right? By the way, the conservative aspect of what came out of the discussions, we took that. We took that to heart. People said, be conservative. So we're trying to be conservative. Represents more conservative than prior years, but does take into account discussions over the past year. We heard that loud and clear. People want us to be a little bit more conservative. And if it proves to be too difficult to achieve this goal, the team can then review altogether possible options to address the gap. So we're not going to just come up with these numbers and say to people, this is what we need to do. We're going to discuss how we get there. And it's really neat. And again, this will be more of an open process. We won't be just presenting these numbers in once and then say, here it is, and then we're off to town meeting and dealing with that. You're probably going to have a multiple number of hearings this year because we want to have input from people to hear the process. Because it's really important. I want to get to town meeting that, you know, once we've got to town meeting, we've really digested this process pretty well. And we understand where the numbers are coming from. Right? Yeah, sure.
On level services, you
Yep.
say it's increased by 3 to 4%. That's higher than the rate of inflation. So why wouldn't you just be, for level services, you'd be at the rate of inflation?
So rate of inflation takes in is primarily wage growth, all right? But the problem we're having in many cases is that there are other things such as health insurance growth, and there are other services that are growing faster. Contracted services are growing faster in some cases than 2.5% growth, and pension growth. Pension growth is growing at a higher clip than most places, and we're trying to account for that as well. So actually, our overall costs, I don't make this number up. It's actually, you can look it up. The growth of budgets annual budgets is in the 4% range. As was said earlier, when we set the tax rate, we're actually trending a little bit below that, which is a good thing. So I mean, I think we're in the right area. It's a fair question, though. Anybody else? Questions?
I do have a question on new growth. Should any of us be concerned that the last 3 years it's trending down?
So
what's on the horizon?
We've been using lower, we've been trending to use a little bit lower, but the actual numbers have come in a little bit higher.
A little bit higher than what you've
Yeah.
been predicting anyway.
Right,
And,
right.
You know, but keep in mind, at some point, new growth, every town, I mean, you're in a renaissance period here. I mean, depending upon what you look at with business, a new growth of like even $1 million range is a lot of money. But at some point, you know, it is going to peter off a little bit unless now some big. And I always go crazy to make a point, but if Disneyland is coming up here, then it's going to continue going up in leaps and bounds. But at some point, if the growth, which is what it is, if the business growth peters off, I mean, you come down a bit, and that's why you keep adjusting every year and coming in under, and hopefully that, you know, you're not caught with your.
So we spend a lot of time on this piece, the economic development piece, because we know that if we don't continue to grow the economy, ultimately that impacts our ability to provide services at a good level. So I spend a lot of time with the various businesses in the town, understanding their growth needs and what they need to try and grow. I think the fact that we've added some really positive things in the past few years, the train coming to Foxborough is huge. You have no idea how big that is. We haven't even seen the real reality of that, but it's a huge factor. The fact that we've zoned properly for Route 1 now, so businesses are starting to look at that as a real opportunity to grow along Route 1, that's the next frontier in terms of real development for the community. The fact that we have plenty of water now, what a lot of people said we didn't have water, we do have water now. That helps. We also have sewer capacity, which we didn't have before. That allows us to do some growth, but in a controlled manner, not in a way that this is going to take away from the quality of life that people are used to in this community. That's really important to balance that we don't end up going too far astray in terms of where we need to go. So I think we pay a lot of attention to that. I work, like I said, closely with a lot of the big businesses in town to understand that. And all indications are that there is still quite a bit of interest in developing in this community. And we're seeing it with higher-end residential development. The building permits have not dropped off. We've not seen any indication of that. And also, based upon what I've heard today, that there are some pretty good plans developing now for Route 1. So in areas that are already being developed. So I think that's a good sign.
Bill, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Can you just explain how did we increase our water capacity?
So what happened? We've actually built a few new wells, and I can think Chris can probably address that better than I can. But we actually sunk some new wells, and we have some new water capacity that we didn't have before. Would you like to address that?
Sure. So right now, we're in the middle of building our third treatment plant in Foxborough.
Yeah.
Along with that treatment plant, we're installing 4 brand new wells. We have had some instances the last couple of years where we've been using 3 million gallons a day, and we've been able to pump 2.9. So we've been
Close.
as the wells have deteriorated over the years, we have lost that capacity to pull water out of the ground. Like I said, those 4 new wells are scheduled to be online, going through treatment beginning in July. Along with that, we're also looking at the 4 wells off of Oak Street, redeveloping those wells, as well as long-term plans, 3-4 years looking at Witch Pond, which is down off of 106, those wells as well. So we are working to make sure that the amount of water that we're allowed to pump out of the ground, we will be able to pump out of the ground.
And it is strategically planned. I mean, we've been paying close attention to that. So probably, and Chris knows this as good as I, because him and I arrived almost the same time. We probably got here, probably within weeks of each other. Yeah. So, but we both saw how difficult the situation was in water here when we first got here. So now we're both seeing some tremendous leaps forward in that area. So we're very pleased that we're able to provide it, and people notice that, and people paying attention to that.
So, Bill, in our total appropriations budget of $70 million, that includes our obligations to our financial policies.
That's right.
Recharging free cash, our contribution to capital stabilization, general stabilization, and all that. It's all inclusive. So whatever.
Right, so what is interesting about that? So we actually have, because and George pointed this out to me earlier, that we've got a pretty healthy overlay reserve right now that we could actually look at for even recharging some of those capital funds even further. So without even impacting the budget process, we can actually do that with we provide some additional reserve capacity.
Your goal, according to your policies, was to either 400 and 400,000 a year is to set up an overlay. This year we did 1.1 million, and so I mean you're setting up more than healthy overlays as you're moving forward, which are in fact a reserve in their own right.
So I think and so I just want to say this is a really important point for some folks who maybe never heard this before, but may have heard one aspect of it. It's been said that we've grown the budget with lots of new people here and et cetera for the past 5-6 years. Well, we did a full analysis of that, and the reality is that we've added 5 positions in less than 6 years. So that's not tremendous growth. I heard 25 new positions, 26 new positions. Factually, not true. Wasn't taken into account was that there were positions that we were filling. When people left, we filled those positions, But we haven't added new positions other than a net of 5 overall. What's even more important is that last year, in this current fiscal year, we took out 10 positions in dispatch. Now we're paying into a regional dispatch, so they cover the pension costs, they cover the health insurance, they cover the salaries, with a healthy contribution from the state for that. So those are 10 people right off our pension plan that we no longer have to pay for.
Can I add one other thing to that, Bill? And we had this thing, I know the AdCom is in here, but we had this discussion too. Oftentimes when we're working off of pay grids. So if you replace somebody that might have been here.
Right.
The other guy might come in here.
Right.
Which is substantially lower than where it is, and then begin traversing back up the pay scale.
So, and I think the other thing that's been said too is that we do 4% raises. Well, we do a 2% COLA and a 2% step. Exactly the same way it's done in Sharon. Exactly the same way it's done in the towns around us. Because we've confirmed it. They all have contracts. They all have steps built into those contracts. We're doing it exactly the same way. We're not doing it differently. We're doing it exactly the same way they're doing it. So I think I think that has to be clarified, and we think it was really important that we get that information out to people. So we're not doing things off the charts. We're doing things exactly consistently in many cases, and sometimes even below that. So I think it's really important to say that. So let's talk a little bit about the, so I've given you the budget guidance. I really need to know how the board feels about the budget guidance, because I need to convey that to the department heads when I start the budget process tomorrow. So I'm hoping to get the budget documents out. So I'd like to get some feedback from the board if that's possible.
You might want to go back to that slide.
Yes.
Sorry. Yeah, right there, you're on it.
There it is. So there was 3 levels. There's the level services, level funding, level services, and level services with some limited enhancement. And really a combination, recommendation is to do a combination of 2 and 3. Understanding full well that at the end of the day, if we're not able to stay within that $2.4 million number, and if somebody comes back and says, you know, somebody really needs some help in a certain department, then it's going to be up to you to decide if we want to do that or not. It's not going to be up to me, it's going to be up to you.
So you guys think you can do the combination of 2 and 3 and still stay within the 3.5%?
I believe so. We believe so.
Well, Bill, isn't 2 and 3 3?
It really is. It really is.
Something?
Well, except for the fact that we said we're going to stay within, we're providing some enhancements, but within the 3 to 4% range, and we said 3.5%. We're shooting for 3.5%.
And you don't say that in 3, so that's why you're saying 2 and 3.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry about that.
So if you'd have said that in 3 also,
Yeah.
it would have been 3.
It would have.
Level services with some limit.
Within 3.5, right.
Okay.
I typed that, so that's why I left. I accidentally left it.
All right, I got you. So are you looking for a
I just need some
proposal?
guidance, because I got to provide guidance to the people who build the budgets. And I don't want to give them something that hasn't been discussed and reviewed.
So, but we're not voting per se, you just want to get
Well, ultimately, what's going to happen is that the budget's going to come before you anyways, and then you'll see. But I want to give them some direction so that they know that I'm not building a budget that's I want to give them guidance so that they build a budget, so they know they're going to want to try and stay within that range.
So I would support a combination of 2 and 3, but I would try and stick to a cap of 3.5%.
Yeah.
That's fine. I'm perfectly fine with that.
Yeah, I don't think any of us want to go to level funding, so I think that is our best option.
You know, not knowing where health insurance is really going to come in, or pension costs and some of those.
Pension costs are pretty much clear because
That's right, we have the actuary.
They laid it out for us as how they're going to do it. The one thing I don't know at this point, because George touched upon it earlier, the $900,000 for the OPEB, and somebody asked that question about the OPEB. We're actually going to do another actuarial study. We do it every 2 years to see where that is. So that may go up, tick up a little bit, so we may have to put some more money into that. But other than that, and health insurance has been relatively good, but you never know. It can go from year to year. And this past year was a great year for most everybody I talked to, but who knows if that's gonna be the same.
So
same trend.
you look at our new growth, we talked about that earlier, and you look at our different nodes, some of our nodes are almost built out. So really, the only node that really hasn't been built out is Route 1. So we're putting a lot of eggs in those baskets.
Yep.
And it's gonna take time, once plans come to fruition, and construction and stabilization.
Right.
I think we gotta try and keep that budget at 3.5%, and anything over and above that, to be cautious, we should put that money in the free cash or fund stabilization,
like that, yeah.
and start putting some of that excess cash into.
So that strategy actually worked for us. A couple of years ago, when we put that money into stabilization, we were able to pay down a good chunk of the cost for the Borough School project and not have to go to the taxpayers and ask for an override or a debt exclusion. That was a great strategy. It worked.
Yep.
It worked. And everybody here supported it, so I appreciate that.
Well, we have the Taylor coming up at some point, there's been talk back and forth about a future fire substation, whether that comes to fruition or not. But it's good to have those cash reserves so you can deploy that cash, especially early on in the process, so the money's available to get plans and studies and whatever else we need to get projects off the ground.
You like to think that everybody operates this way, but I can tell you, not everybody operates this way. I can tell you that from experience. George can see it, I've seen it in other places as well. So that goes to the fine work that our previous finance director did, the work that everybody here and has participated in the process of developing our financial policies. And I also think that you collectively, as a community, have done a great job of being good overseers of your financial conditions. And we want to try and maintain that and respect that.
We're taxpayers too.
Yeah, that's right.
I keep saying that, but it's true. Everybody up here has the town's best interest at heart here, so.
I might be oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, John?
Yeah, a sense of a different group isn't being heard here tonight. While we're discussing this, which is all well and good, I don't have any problems with it, the planning board is conducting a series of community discussions, and one of the outcomes from that is people who are having great pain with the cost of living here, and they're asking, how can we keep the taxes from going so high?
Yeah.
So if I were to take that as an input, and I said, all right, instead of 2.5%, we went half of that, that effectively reduces the $3.5 million to $2.9 million. Maybe you want to think about that.
Well, your net number, though, is only 2.4 available for new money for next year's budget, though, John.
I'm just looking at the numbers here.
Right, so there's so off of that number, some of that number is there's a net number that came out, and that's the 2.4 number. So we're only going to raise 2.4 for new money for next year's budget. Okay, so I maybe just misunderstood that, and I'm happy to explain that. I have George explain it to you. But
if the 2.5% were 1.25%, you're effectively subtracting $600,000.
If you did that, you would reduce services. Guaranteed.
Well,
guaranteed.
It's $600,000 less than the numbers you're saying.
Understood. So the 2.4%, I said the average rate of increase in budgets statewide is 4%.
Yep.
We're trying to come in under that.
Yep.
At 3.5%. Okay. So, and I will tell you that the function of why people are having difficulty with the taxes is a function of value. Values have risen much higher than the tax rates themselves. And so what's happening is that's a function of the entire region, not just us. Not just us. So if you were to go and ask that same question anywhere else, if you were to go to Sharon, you were to go to Walpole, any one of the people that are living in this community, there's no place that they can point to say, we're growing at a faster rate, we're growing at a lesser rate, which is really important to remember.
You can't spend value at Shaw's and Stop and Shop.
Understood. I understand. I get it.
What people are concerned with is the number that is in their tax bill.
I understand. So I guess what you have to look at, though, is the fact that if the average tax bill is still below the median for this region, it's still a better value than most places you can go to.
I'm not arguing that.
So I can't turn around and say, I have to spend less, otherwise I start affecting the services, which is why people move here in the first place. Right, so that's really an important piece of that. And that's what affects, and values go down at that point, and guess what? Then it's not good news for anybody. So it's a slippery slope if you go in that direction. So
quick question, there was a little discourse with the salaries and us saying 2%, with you being 2 and 2. So could we maybe find out what some of the other communities are doing with positions that aren't with steps? I remember, like, for example, so last year when we were talking about new fire chief, and, there was some discussion, and some of the things to do with the fire budget, and Mike Helber, used example, town of Canton. He said they're a community that puts a lot of money into their public safety, especially the fire department, compared to a town like Mansfield. So, as he was saying it, I just decided to, Google, and if you pull up the town of Canton, their town hall website will give you all the contracts. So next
we
to
have
them-
them on ours too.
Yeah, so, but next to them were like fire chief, police chief.
Yep.
And next to them was all 2%. So the problem is, so I can understand what you're saying, some positions we're bringing in at a lower salary and giving a step, but that's not what we're doing on all our positions.
So
The higher positions.
Mike, you want to answer that question? Because you're a new person who just was under a contract. You want to answer that question?
Which parts?
The 2%, the 2% versus the increase? What's in your contract?
Mine's 2%. How many?
Yeah,
2.5.
2%.
That's
The
it.
2 or 2.5%.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, last year we gave Chief Baker 4%.
No, I think he took 2. I actually took 2. Oh, because you know what? I stand corrected. I stand corrected. Okay, he took 2 because he didn't get one the year before that. That's the reason why. It was a correction. So yeah, he averaged 2% over the 2 years.
Okay, because the actual budget said 8.16. And then, so we discussed it, and then it went down to, I just don't understand.
It went down to a
how-
4%
how
raise,
somebody
right.
wouldn't get, especially the police chief, wouldn't get his raise the year before. But, and so when we're seeing the budgets and you look across, department heads are getting 4%. So that's why I think I'm a little disconnected with.
Not all department heads are getting 4% because don't forget, there's a pay plan. The town has a pay plan, compensation plan. Sharon has it too. They have actually more steps than we do. Okay? And the steps are, the step plan is a 2% step plan plus a cost of living adjustment. That's the way it works.
Okay.
And eventually that stops.
It stops,
When you hit
yeah.
the top, yes.
When you hit the top, it stops. That's right.
Bill, so I'll start out by just saying ignorance is bliss, but on your recommendation, I went to the Association of Town Finance Committee annual meeting.
Yeah.
And that was really eye-opening.
Yeah.
I feel like you'll be answering the 2 or 4% question for the next 10 years until we get some kind of financial trend monitoring system in town. I've spoken with you,
Yeah.
our friend John.
John Codere, yeah.
Foxborough.
Yeah.
What I wanted to chat with
Sure.
the chairman about, financial trend monitoring is looking at answering the questions that we have as a town, including compensation as a percentage of total budget, answering those questions, looking at 10-year trending, looking at a 5-year forward-looking
Yeah.
forecast, and having that documented
Yeah.
so that whoever wants to can understand the questions that are important to the town, what are those answers,
Sure.
quantifiable, looking back 10 years. Otherwise, everything's anecdotes.
Right.
5 heads, 22 heads, 2%, 4%, 22%. It's very anecdotal until we have that data, and
Sure.
it's
trend.
Don't disagree with you, and I appreciate you saying that. So we talked about that, actually, today. We were talking about how we'd love to create, a document, a budget document that could win the GFOA award.
Yes.
All right, so.
Can you just mention what that is?
So the GFOA Budget Award is a national award. It's not a statewide, it's a national award that gets evaluated by a panel. And it goes through a series of reviews for individuals that have nothing to do with the community. They take that document and they review it. And they look for there's a whole list of things that go into that document.
Mandatory requirements
Yeah.
that enable your regular taxpayer citizen
to see it.
Understand what the budget is about.
Mhm.
There's charts and numbers, but there's a lot of also prose, if you will, explaining what the pieces are, how they work, and what they mean.
And how it works, right. Absolutely true. So we had that conversation today, as a matter of fact. Because actually Marie's worked with a community that actually had that in Concord. So she has the template. So we can actually start working on that.
Excellent.
Right? All right? Jim?
So back to this, just, if we recommend a combination of 2 and 3, and it's not that I don't support it, I'm just a little bit gray, how does that work? How do you take that to a department to know there are 2 or a 3? Or, some department may be a 1?
Yeah, some departments may go up and some departments may go down, actually. In some departments, it may be just flat. Because what happens in some cases that a person may leave, we hire them at a lower number, and their number is actually flat for that year. So it averages out. So the goal for us is trying to average it out so it comes in at 3.5% overall.
So that's the budget guidance you're looking for today, not a 2 or 3 particular department, but the 3.5, okay.
Overall, so that's what we try and shoot for. And when we get to the review process, before it comes to each and every one of them, and I say to you, look, I could get, maybe it might come in a little lower. It could come in at 3.4, 3.3. Yes. But it could come in at 3.6, and I'll say, and here's why. I'll explain it to you. But our goal is to shoot for 3.5.
Well, I think, is everybody in agreement with level service funding, a combination of 2 and 3?
With the goal of 3.5%.
3.5%.
No more than
That
3.5%.
specifies it enough.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yep.
I'm good with 3.5.
Thank you. All right. So the next piece of this is final piece, is to talk about the budget calendar.
That's out of the.
Yeah, I've got it right here. Yeah, I've got it right here. So this is a lot of information on one sheet, but we can give this out to everybody so you all have this.
Yeah, I got it.
But and we can hand it out to George. George's going to hand it out to everybody so you all have it. So this is where we're looking for guidance tonight. We're going to put the budget templates out tomorrow with the guidance that you've given us tonight, and then we're going to start the process. And the budget guidance will be reviewed with the department heads at a staff meeting on Monday, December 2nd. And I'll expect the budgets back in our office by do the finance on December 13th. All right, the Monday, December 16th, school committee public review of school budgets and do the finance. Does that work for you guys at this point on the 16th? Okay. And then the 20th, budget document request will be prepared and distributed to administration, and then we'll conduct our reviews in terms of internal reviews, and then I'll provide a recommended budget by January 9th on department heads' budgets. I'll prepare that and then and distribute it to the Board of Selectmen. And I could probably do that distribute it to the AdCom as well, so that they have it ahead of time, so there's no surprises with them. Does that seem okay with you, Seth? I mean, I was going to distribute the document, the recommended budget on December 10th to the board.
Yes.
And provide it to you at the same time.
Please, yes.
Okay, all right. And then on Wednesday, January 15th, or it could be January 21st, preliminary balanced budget review with the Board of Selectmen. And then on the 22nd, the non-budgetary financial articles can be reviewed with the AdCom. And then the budgets, the Board of Selectmen reviewed budgets prepared and distributed to the AdCom on the 22nd as well, or 24th. We'll try and get it to you on the 22nd if we can. Then January 27th, school committee and public review and vote of your recommended school budget. Does that seem to work for you, Bill? And you good? Everybody's good? Okay. Good. Yeah, by statute, you're required to, yeah, I get that, so that's, okay. Advisory liaison committee initial reviews of budgets were first request. We'll go start on the 29th. CIP requests will be reviewed and distributed to the CIP committee on the 21st of February. Advisory liaison committee initial reviews of the budget requests will be to the advisory committee on the 26th of Wednesday, the 26th of February. Saturday, March 7th, will be the Capital Improvement Committee's annual review process, which occurs right in this room here and is televised. On Tuesday, March 10th, the Board of Selectmen will review the CIP requests. And Wednesday, March 11th, the Advisory Committee will review the CIP requests. March 27th, the Comprehensive Balanced Budget document prepared and distributed. And Tuesday, March 31st, Selectmen final recommendations on FY21 budgets. Wednesday, April 1st, the Advisory Committee makes their final recommendations. Friday, April 10th, the final budget document is warrant sent to the printer. And April 27th, the AdCom recommendations submitted to the newspaper. And April 30th, the AdCom recommendations are published and warrant is posted. And finally, Monday, May 11th, 2020 is town meeting. So that's how it all plays out. So we've got a busy schedule over the next 6-7 months. So I think what's important for people to know, though, is that this is a long process. It's not something that happens in a few minutes. It takes several months for us to go through this process, to come up with final recommendations. So, any questions? All right, Seth.
I was just looking over the AdCom committee reviews. And so from Wednesday, January 29 to Wednesday, February 26, there's nothing, but presumably there's weekly AdCom reviews.
Yes, yeah, weekly AdCom. So that doesn't make, that's your calendar as to how you want to do that. So we'll get together with you and start talking about how we're going to lay that out, and we'll set that up with Pam in our office, and we'll help you get that done.
All right.
Okay? All right. All right. Great.
Yeah, thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate you all coming together and getting this stuff done. Thank you. I appreciate it.
George.
Good
job.
Thank you.
All right.
We have one other.
Oh, okay, you're open. Oh, we get to go.
Yeah, have a good night.
Thanks, Amy.
Bye now, thank you.
Amy, thank you.
All right, guys, we got to continue with our meeting. Selectmen's update. Really, the only thing I have in talking to Mike is we're going to be hiring a new DPW director. And Mike was questioning if anyone on the Board of Selectmen wanted to be a member of that committee. Anybody that has a interest in being on the committee?
Dave?
All right, Dave. You got Dave. Okay, sorry.
Touch base afterwards with the timeline. Thanks.
Any other Selectmen update?
All right.
Great. Bill, you're up.
Okay, thank you.
Can we come over?
All right, so just a couple things. First, the Borough School groundbreaking ceremony is going to be on... I'm sorry.
Seth, do you think you have an agenda item tonight?
Not for you guys, we just have to vote on that, so I wanted to
Oh,
follow somewhere.
okay. I heard you say we're
check
on
in the
the
room.
agenda, so I was like,
You can go to the room at the end of the hallway if it's open. If it's open. All right, all right, all right. All right, Borough School groundbreaking ceremony Tuesday is scheduled for Tuesday, December 3rd at 11 a.m. at the school itself. So if anybody can make it, certainly welcome to have you there. Should be a great thing for us. And then the annual tree lighting ceremony on the Common is scheduled for Saturday from 4 to 7. So in case anybody can make that, that's another good event. On December 5th of next week, Secretary of Environmental Affairs Colleen Theoritis will be here in Foxborough at December 5th at 1:30 to make some important announcements for communities in this region. They have selected Foxborough to make those announcements and to be present in the room when those announcements are made. No further information has been made available for release other than to say that this is a good news announcement.
What date is that again, Bill?
That's December 5th at 1:30.
Can you send that out just to look up what it is? Yeah.
Where was she from?
I didn't retain any of
She's
that.
from Secretary of Environmental Affairs.
Okay.
Secretary of Environmental Affairs. So
She's going to be here in this room?
She's going to be here in this room, and a number of committees have been asked to attend, and we've been asked to host it. So I have a feeling I know what it's for, but I'm the sworn secrecy to say nothing about it until the announcements are made, because that's how they do it. But
Yeah.
I don't want to steal their thunder, so to speak.
Yeah, send us all a notice.
I will do that.
Is it,
Right.
what, 1:30 you said?
Yeah.
Daytime, okay.
It's 1:30. Now, other than that, happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Hope everybody has a great holiday week. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike?
So I have 3 recruitments to talk about. We did hire the new community information specialist who will be sitting in this seat for your December 10th and 17th meeting. And we searched far and wide. We had a great number of finalists, very highly qualified, and ended up not really where we thought we would end up, but ended up hiring from within. This wasn't an internal search. We ended up hiring Christina Metcalf, who works at the library. She is their administrator, business manager for the library, and so she'll be starting here a week from yesterday. And she comes highly qualified. Not only does she have a business college degree, she's gone through the supervisory leadership program. The town has sent her to that. She's also gone through the Suffolk and Mass Municipal Managers Association certificate program. And we're really excited to have her come work with us. She's very highly tech savvy, as were all of the finalists. So we're excited to have her joining us next week. The 2 other recruitments are, as the chairman mentioned, the DPW director, and we're looking to that posting has been closed out. Very highly qualified pool of applicants that we'll be going through with Selectman Feldman and a panel of experts. And we're looking to narrow that down to recommend a hire before the end of this calendar year. And the other one is to fill the opening we just created in the library for the library administrator position. That one is posted, and we're hoping to fill that position by the middle to end of January. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Action items?
Motion to approve the extension of a liquor license hours to permit serving at 11 a.m., accompanied by food on Saturdays for the 2020 for Lakeview Pavilion.
Second.
Any further discussion? I have a question. Is this something they've done in the past, or do you know if this was something new?
I feel like we've done this for them in the past.
Okay.
I think they have, yeah.
Okay. All those in favor?
Motion to approve extension of occupancy hours on 12/2/19 to 1:30 a.m. for the Garth Brooks event.
Second.
Any further?
A six-string.
Yeah. Any further discussion? But this still is alcohol get stopped serving at a certain hour, is that correct?
Yes, to 1:30 a.m. as opposed to the normal time would be 1 a.m.
This says 12:30 in the note.
12:30 still for
Yeah.
Still,
alcohol.
alcohol stops
12:30,
at 12:30, they could
Yes.
just stay an extra.
Exactly, they can stay an extra half hour.
Right, okay, good. All those in favor? Aye.
That's actually quite an event, by the way, to be
You
selected.
can't even buy tickets.
You can't buy
for it.
tickets for it. We were selected as a venue in this community, of course, Sixth String being the venue, out of a national list of groups. It's very hard to get onto this list, and I give Patriot Place credit for, and the Sixth Strings folks the lure there. It's quite a show.
Motion to approve Officer Dion's tuition reimbursement in the amount of $1,849.50.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Motion to approve acceptance of a gift donation of $1,355 to the Council on Aging, Human Services from multiple donors to be used for programs at the Senior Center in memory of Ray Malley.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion to approve a gift donation in the amount of $330 from the Friends of Foxborough Seniors to the Council on Aging, Human Services to pay for one half of August, September, and October 2019's Tai Chi classes.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Motion to approve acceptance of a gift donation of $50 from Anonymous to the Council on Aging, Human Services to be used for the Lockbox program.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Motion to approve acceptance of a gift donation of $50 from Anonymous to the Council on Aging, Human Service. We just did that one, sorry. Ladies and gentlemen.
Minutes?
Motion to approve session meetings from 10:15:19 and 10:29:19.
We'll do them separately.
Separately? The first one will be for 10/15/2019.
Second.
Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Aye.
And separately, approve the Board of Selectmen minutes from 10/29/19.
Second.
Any further discussion?
I'm going to just recuse myself. I wasn't here.
Same.
Same, right, just the three of us. And I didn't see anything. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. One last one.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Good night, everybody.
It was before 10.